allowed to talk in this country. I'm also going to be talking, of course, a lot about this 11,000 Channel migrants, a milestone that was predictable but that nobody wanted. We have hit that today now. And as well, we're going to be hammering this issue as the mortgage misery for millions continues. Is it time to say bye-bye to Andrew Bailey, the Governor of the Bank of England? I certainly think so. Let's have it. OK, few big topics for you there. GBviews at GBnews.com. If you backed Brexit, would you still? The majority of Brexit backers still believe in Brexit Britain, which I think is a good thing. But I'm also wanting your reaction to this news. It's a GB News exclusive. We're trying to get this guy stopped from talking in the country. This radical Islamist hate preacher who has been allowed into Britain to just spew bile across the streets. Why are we letting this happen? GBviews at GBnews.com. But now, here's your headlines.
Good afternoon. The time is 1 minute past 3. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. And in breaking news, a 25-year-old man has been found guilty of murdering a Met police officer in London in 2020. Luis de Zoysa shot Matt Ratana in the chest at a police station in Croydon. De Zoysa managed to smuggle in an antique revolver into the custody block and opened fire while still in handcuffs. And in other breaking news, a man has pleaded guilty to the manslaughters of 39 people found dead in a lorry trailer in Essex in 2019. 50-year-old Marius Mihai Dragici was detained by police in Romania last year. He was charged with 39 counts of manslaughter and conspiracy to assist unlawful immigration. He's alleged to be the ringleader of a people-smuggling gang. In 2021, 4 other defendants were jailed for their roles in the deaths. A former policeman has been jailed for 5 years for sexual offences and misconduct whilst running a volunteer police cadet scheme. Adnan Ali, who served with Greater Manchester Police, sexually assaulted 3 victims aged between 15 and 18 and sent messages which were, quote, bordering on relentless. The judge said the 36-year-old deliberately ignored guidelines for cadet schemes, which include principles of respect and safeguarding. A member of far-right group Patriotic Alternative has been jailed for sharing terrorist content with online followers. Christopher Kearney from Liverpool is believed to be the first member of the organisation to be convicted of terrorist offences. He's been sentenced to 4 years and 8 months at the Old Bailey. The 38-year-old was extradited from Spain following an investigation led by the Met Police Counter-Terrorism Command. Kearney pleaded guilty in March to 2 counts of spreading terrorist publications. Prosecutors claim by setting up a Telegram account in the name of Charlie Big Potatoes. Mortgage lenders and the Chancellor have agreed people should be given a 12-month delay before repossession proceedings start against borrowers unable to pay. It follows talks with bank bosses this morning to see whether more can be done to support struggling households. Yesterday, the Bank of England raised the interest rate to 5% as it tries to tackle high inflation. Jeremy Hunt says homeowners shouldn't be afraid of asking their mortgage providers for help.
The most significant thing is that they can pick up the phone to their bank or their mortgage lender and talk about their situation without any worry that it will impact their credit score. And if they decide to make their payments easier by extending the period of their mortgage or by going to an interest-only package, they can go back to their original package without any questions asked, without any impact on their credit score within 6 months. That's the reassurance that people like Martin Lewis have been saying will make a big difference for families in those situations.
Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer, meanwhile, says the government needs to take responsibility.
I think what people want is action, not words, and what we suggested is that there's a requirement on lenders to take these measures because there are going to be many, many mortgage holders, many families across the country who are now even more worried about paying their mortgage. That's on top of all the other bills, and they know that the government's failed now for 13 years. They know the government crashed the economy last year. What they want, I think, is a much stronger sense that the government is gripping this.
And Unite Union says strikes at Heathrow will end as airport security workers accept an improved pay deal. And 5 and campus security were due to take 31 days of strike action throughout the summer. The union says workers will receive a pay increase of between 15.5% and 17.5%. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's back over to Patrick.
Happy Friday. Loads on today, but there is really only one place to start for me. Nigel Farage has a simple message for all of our viewers and listeners. Happy Brexit Day. Yes, it's exactly 7 years since the great British public gave the establishment a bloody nose by voting to leave the European Union. GB News' very own Nigel Farage was, of course, one of the architects of Brexit. He is celebrating today, but he's got a warning for all you Brexiteers. You might have to have the same fight all over again.
It's that day, it's June the 23rd. 7 years ago today, we went out, we beat not just the British establishment, but the global establishment, despite every effort through Project Fear to frighten the life out of us. Tactics, of course, they'd use again during lockdown. Trouble is, the establishment never accepted it. They never, ever forgave us. And after 3.5 years of wrangling and finally getting rid of Theresa May, Boris made a load of promises, and I'm afraid his government didn't really believe in it. We've been horribly let down on immigration, on the reduction of EU rules. Frankly, the Tories have sabotaged Brexit. Sure, we've left, and we're standing taller in the world. And our financial services industry is bigger than it was, not smaller, as predicted. But the two big deliverables on immigration and regulations have been sabotaged. I fear, under a Labour government, we may just have to fight this all over again. Do you know what? If we do, we'll win again. Happy Brexit Day.
Well, there you go. Those are Nigel's views, of course. Now, this is important because I think a lot of people might have been forgiven for believing that narrative, that the majority of people who backed Brexit the first time round will have changed their minds now they've had a good look that maybe the grass isn't greener on the other side. But polling has found that more than 70% of people who voted leave would still do so if another referendum was held, showing very little regret at all. There's more to this as well, as I'm going to delve into. But has leaving the European Union on that day in 2016 been a good thing for Britain? Look, joining me now is political commentator Matthew Stadler. Matthew, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. Now, look, I'm just going to run through some of these polling stats, really. OK, so 72% would vote Brexit again. 61% still think that it would work in the long run. That is bad news for people who have been campaigning to reverse it or drag us closer to the EU because they think that the British public will have become disillusioned with it, no?
I don't see why it's a cause for celebration for leavers, for Brexiteers, to suggest that 70% still would do the same thing again. Because that means if we were to have another vote tomorrow, we would vote to come back. Now, that said, Patrick, it is absolutely clear in my mind that we are not rejoining the European Union anytime soon. Keir Starmer has made it abundantly clear that that is not going to happen, as I say, in the foreseeable future. So if you voted Brexit, you can relax on that front. You showed your clip from Nigel Farage. He didn't look very happy, did he? And in fact, very recently, he basically said that Brexit has failed. What's really important
in its current form, Matthew, this is the thing. Just want to pick you up on a couple of things there. It's a question of trust and believability when it comes to Keir Starmer, a man who campaigned so hard to keep us in the European Union to begin with. And then now, do we really believe that he wouldn't try to do something through the back door, a Swiss-style deal? David Lammy has come out and said that he thinks that we could get some kind of deal like that, which I think would be quite enraging to a lot of Brexiteers. But can I also just pick you up on that idea that if there was a vote tomorrow on Brexit, then it would lose? The really interesting stat for me on this is that when Brexiteers were asked who they blame for a quote-unquote bad Brexit, 88% of people said that they have no faith now in our political class, i.e. they were let down by the politicians. So it's not the idea of Brexit, it's those idiots that we employed to do it.
Well, I don't think our politicians are idiots, but you're not going to find me defending the government. I think it's important to point out, Patrick, that only 18% 18% of people who actually voted leave, according to quite a big survey, quite a big poll, by I think Public First, so about 4,000 people asked, only 18% think that Brexit has been a success. That is fairly damning, isn't it? It's fairly devastating. You can blame the government. Of course, just let me finish the point, Patrick. Of course you can blame the government, and I blame the government for a lot. But you could also blame Brexit. Now, has Brexit been a total disaster? I voted Remain more with my head than with my heart. I certainly had some sympathy for those who decided that they wanted to leave because of what I thought of as the remoteness of democracy. I don't think it has been a catastrophe. But can you name many advantages?
I tell you what, I think, Matthew, I think seriously that given the fact that we had this ridiculous second referendum campaign, we've then had COVID, we then had, well, before that we had Theresa May, for goodness sake, and then on top of that as well, we've had things like the war in Ukraine, we've had a concerted effort, in my view, to undermine Brexit non-stop since the moment that it started. And then on top of that, despite enacting Brexit in a way, we've still not taken control of our borders in the way that we would like. We've decided to shackle ourselves essentially to EU regulation when we should have been Singapore on Thames, for goodness sake. I'm amazed that 72% of Brexit backers still want to back Brexit, given the kind of cat-handed approach that we've taken to it. Matthew, can I just park you there for one sec, my good man? Because I do believe that we do have now Rupert Lowe, who's a former Brexit Party MEP as well. Rupert, there we are. Better late than never, my old chap. Right, so Rupert, what Matthew was saying there at the end was we haven't seen any real benefits of Brexit. And to be fair, Rupert, he has got a point, because when a lot of people, myself included, voted for Brexit, I mean, good grief, if you'd have told me that we'd have just hit 11,000 Channel migrants and 1.2 million people arriving in this country last year, I'd have told you where to go. But it's happened.
Well, I think first of all, where does the truth lie with all this stuff, Patrick? I mean, there are some good things from Brexit, as Ben Habib was saying last night on the BBC on Question Time. Our trade with Europe's actually gone up. Okay, that's our exports to Europe have gone up, but so have our imports. We are a very different economy to Europe. We're a service-based economy rather than a manufacturing-based economy. And, what we're up against is this post-war plan to take Britain into this federal European superstate, which is fundamentally socialist in construct. And what one's got to remember is that the British people were given a vote. The government spent millions of pounds trying to persuade us that we should stay. But the British people voted to leave. And the real problem, you've hit the nail on the head, the real problem we've got is that the political establishment, which I'm with you. Matthew was sitting on the fence on that one, but I think they're completely inept. I think they are. That the House of Commons is now full of people who aren't fit to be governing, and the civil service is full of people who've, unlike, they're not serving the public, which they should be. They've got a mind of their own, and their mind is basically set on, I think, trying to rejoin Europe. Okay. So we haven't got what I would call a proper Brexit, as you quite rightly say. Right. The Northern Ireland Protocol, we haven't even got our sovereign borders that we used to have. So the will is not there to deliver Brexit. Brexit is...
That's a good point. That's a good point for me to pause you there, Rupert. The will is not there. Matthew, can I... chaps, I'm really sorry. I've got some breaking news. I'm afraid. Sorry about this. I'm going to have to go now to, I believe, a police press conference where we can, I think, hear Mark Rowley of the Met Police just discussing a recent... we're going live now to Northampton Crown Court, where there is a press conference taking place after Louis de Souza was found guilty of murdering Metropolitan Police Officer Matt Ratana, who was shot in the chest inside a custody block in Croydon. Let's go.
In the days after his death, tributes flowed in from Matt's colleagues, from communities, from those he'd served, and from those who knew him in his life outside policing. They were a testament to the man that he was. Whether it was on the streets or in the custody centre, as a uniformed police officer, on the rugby field, or later as a coach, it's clear that he was someone who made an enduring impact wherever he went. We will ensure that he's never forgotten. I've also seen the heavy impact that Matt's murder has had on his colleagues, those he worked with in Croydon, and also the many officers and staff he served with alongside in his lengthy career. That impact falls especially heavily on those who were present on the night that he was murdered. And this tragedy has caused me to reflect on the uncertain world within which police officers operate. and the risks they take day by day. Officers never have a perfect picture of what awaits them at the next incident. Every day, for example, we take several firearms off the streets of London, and the vast majority of those are seized in routine police work by unarmed officers. The men and women in policing daily stepping forward into uncertainty and risk are truly remarkable and deserve admiration. The officers and staff on duty the night Matt was murdered showed just those attributes. Without their courage, I believe that more lives would certainly have been lost. I'm immensely proud of their professionalism and their bravery. They have my enduring admiration and my full support. Thank you.
OK, so that was Mark Rowley there, who is, of course, the head of the Met. What he was referring to was that the man who shot dead a serving Metropolitan Police officer in a custody suite, Luis de Souza, is 25 years old. He was handcuffed during that incident. He has obviously been found guilty of murder after shooting that police officer, Matt Ratana, dead. So we'll have more on that as we get it. But Mark Rowley there just expressing his, of course, sorrow that it ever happened in the first place, praising the bravery of his officers. Just that breaking news there that the man has been found guilty now of the murder of that police officer. We're not going to return to our Brexit debate that we were having before then, but I will have a big interview with Lee Anderson, the kind of Mr. Red Wall. Very much seems to be Mr. GB News, by the way, because his first show airs this evening. I've got an interview with him coming up a little bit later on where we are discussing all things Brexit. A reminder for you that polling data shows that 72% of people who backed Brexit the first time round would still back it this time. And what is interesting as well is that 88% of the people who backed Brexit have lost total faith in our politicians. So it's not the concept of Brexit, it's the people who we pay taxpayer money to enact it. That's who people are angry with. So that is a fascinating stat. But I think this is going to be, frankly, one that you will be talking around with your families later on this evening, just by how shocking it is. 2 events in the UK featuring an Islamist hate cleric have thankfully now been cancelled, but that is following a GB News investigation. The radical Islamic preacher has previously praised the 9/11 terrorists as brave lions and lauded the mastermind of the attacks, Osama bin Laden. He also thinks that anybody who offends Allah should be beheaded. So it's not exactly a lovely chap, is he? Why on earth was he allowed into this country? And more to the point, as far as I can see, is it not deeply concerning how many people in this country were willing to go and listen to this guy talk? GB News investigative reporter Charlie Peters has the exclusive story. Who is he? What's going on?
His name is Anayatullah Abbasi. He's a cleric from Bangladesh, and he's been in the country, we understand, for about a week now on a speaking tour. So far, he has successfully delivered 2 talks, one in Nottingham and one in Birmingham. Once we were aware that this man was in the country, we then started contacting the venues, the police, and, of course, the Home Office to alert them to this situation. So far now, these are the third. There's been 3 talks that have been cancelled. Newham in East London was cancelled on Wednesday night after we got involved, and now we have talks in Leicester and Luton, both cancelled. Leicester was lined up for Sunday, Luton on Monday. You've detailed some of the extremist rhetoric that Mr. Abbasi has delivered both in Bangladesh and abroad, but there is so much more. In fact, it was almost impossible to go through the reams of information that we had about this man before we went on air earlier in the week. Not only has he called for beheadings of non-Muslims, but also of Ahmadi Muslims, a very persecuted sect of the Islamic faith around the world. Indeed, in 2016, some of your viewers might remember the murder of Asad Shah, a Glaswegian shopkeeper. 2 men from Bradford drove up to Glasgow and beat him so violently that all of the bones in his face were broken. So this direct incitement to violence against not only non-Muslims, but Ahmadi Muslims, we know it has an effect in the country. And the question we're asking of the Home Office is, how did he get in? And more importantly, why is he still here? Yeah, no, 100%. These are pertinent questions. Why on earth was this guy allowed into Britain to go on, as far as we can tell, some kind of potentially commercial, bile-spewing radical Islamist tour? I think the other big question, as I said before, is how many people are willing to go and watch this guy? I mean, you look at these major cities and these major venues and you think, well, that should be concerning, that we have so many people in Britain who presumably agree with him. But
What has the Home Office said when it comes to how this guy got in, whether or not they're going to just deport him now?
They've been very short on details, I imagine, because they haven't got much to tell us. They've said that the Home Office works with its partners to deal with those who sow hatred and division. Those are the direct words of the statement given to me by the Home Office. But I believe that they weren't aware when he arrived that this man was in the country, and they weren't aware of his radical past. So they were certainly asleep at the wheel when Mr. Abbasi turned up. Since then, I think there is now a concern shared by many of the sources I've spoken to. The Home Office are just going to wait it out. He's only got apparently 5 more days of his visit in the country, according to the itinerary that GB News has seen. So I think some are suggesting that he'll just wait out the rest of his time and return to Bangladesh without a forced deportation. The problem we now have, of course, not only is that a very dangerous situation, having a radical, pro-violent, inciting speaker in the country, but also because GB News has been on top of these events and got them shut down, will he now go underground? Will there be the level of public scrutiny that we've been able to apply to these talks, or will he disappear from the radar? Will he disappear from the police, the councils and the Home Office? I think that is of very serious concern.
Yeah, absolutely. And well done, Charlie, for having a look into this guy and at least getting some of these talks cancelled anyway. I mean, doing the job that you could argue that the Home Office and the police force should be doing themselves. Charlie Peters, thank you. I will be talking to you again about this with a little bit more of an update later on in the show, so massively appreciated. It's Charlie Peters there, GB News Investigates reporter, with that exclusive story. Now, the bosses of Britain's biggest banks have been holding talks with Chancellor Jeremy Hunt today, so bankers and Hunt. It writes itself. But will it make any difference to the mortgage misery that millions of people are facing? And should the state ever step in and help pay your mortgage? Strong views on either side of that one. I'm Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the people's channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The people's channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the people's channel, Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the people's channel. Britain is watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the people's channel, Britain's news channel.
In a few moments, I will have more info on the Titan sub tragedy that sadly claimed the lives of those 5 men, the Titanic 5. And Rishi Sunak might have promised to stop the boats, but I'm going to bring you figures that prove that he's fighting a losing battle. We've hit yet another unwanted landmark today. But following a meeting between bank bosses and Chancellor Jeremy Hunt in number 11 Downing Street today, it has been announced that banks and building societies will offer more flexibility to struggling mortgage holders as rates continue to soar. So the summit comes after the Bank of England raised interest rates to a whopping 5% yesterday, leaving millions facing spiralling mortgage bills. The Chancellor says that he's made 3 major agreements with lenders.
So today I agreed with the banks and the principal mortgage lenders 3 very important things. The first is that absolutely anyone can talk to their bank or their mortgage lender and it will have no impact whatsoever on their credit score. That's really important. A lot of people worry about that. The second is that if you are anxious about the impact on your family finances and you change your mortgage to interest only or you extend the term of your mortgage and you want to go back to your original mortgage deal within 6 months, you can do so, no questions asked, no impact on your credit score. That, I think, is going to give people a lot of comfort and stop people worrying about having conversations with their banks when they are worried about their financial situation. And the final thing is for people who are at risk of losing their home in that extreme situation, the banks and mortgage lenders have a number of things in place. It's the last thing that they want to do to repossess a home. But in that extreme situation, they've agreed there will be a minimum 12-month period before there's a repossession without consent.
Well, I welcome to the fray now GB News' business and economics editor Liam Halligan. He's at Downing Street. Many people wish he was in there knocking some heads together, actually being our Chancellor, because he's been right about pretty much everything since the start. Liam, what's the latest?
Well, the latest, Patrick, is that the Treasury have just issued a statement that reflects that mortgage summit this morning. After the Bank of England raised interest rates yesterday by 0.5 percentage point to 5%, there is a lot of alarm out there. An awful lot of people are coming off fixed-rate mortgages, 5-year, 3-year, 2-year fixes, that the agreements they made with their lenders at very low rates, and now they're facing much, much higher interest rates, given that the Bank of England's raised rates 13 times since December 2021. So the big lenders came here today, the likes of Santander, HSBC, Lloyds, Virgin. They talked to the Chancellor, they talked to the Financial Conduct Authority, and the Chancellor feels he's come up with some kind of agreement. This is not a legal agreement that sticks. There's not new primary legislation here, but the Chancellor is telling us, we're yet to hear in a statement in written form from the lenders themselves, the Chancellor is telling us that the banks will demonstrate a little bit more forbearance with households who are having a hard time meeting their increased mortgage payments as their fixed rate deals expire, Patrick.
And sorry, Liam, just to drill down, do we know specifically what this really means? Because I know there was a lot of talk, wasn't there, about, well, you know, is the state going to help you pay for your mortgage, for example? And a lot of people say that will just be the worst thing to do, even if it might be quite kind. So what are some of the specifics on this then?
So there's been nothing from either main party, the government or the Labour Party, when it comes to, you know, paying our mortgages for us or helping us directly with cash. That would annoy a lot of people who are renting, a lot of people who aren't homeowners. It would come across as middle-class welfare. So Labour aren't saying that either. What the Conservatives are saying, what Jeremy Hunt is saying, is that the lenders have agreed in principle that if you do want to talk to your lender about extending the term of your mortgage, making it longer, not 25 years, but 35 years or 45 years to keep your monthly payment lower, if you want to move from a repayment mortgage to an interest rate only mortgage, you can do that without fuss, without cost, and it won't impact your credit rating. Crucially, one omission from what I thought might be in there, I can't see in any of the written documentation I've read so far, and the Treasury statement has only literally just been published, I can't see any respite when it comes to people requesting repayment holidays. Sometimes you can delay your mortgage payments for a few months if you're in difficulty. I can't see that if you do request that, your credit rating isn't going to be impacted. So that's an interesting omission, it seems to me, with the lenders refusing to go as far as the Chancellor wants them to go. As for the Labour Party, well, Labour leader Keir Starmer, he's saying that he would actually force the lenders to impose easier conditions on borrowers. I'm not sure how he can do that, but this is what he said.
What we have put on the table, what we've suggested as Labour Party, is that lenders are required to allow people to go onto interest-only mortgages for a short period because that will lower their bills, or to lengthen the term of their mortgage. But it's very important that if we do that, one, we require lenders to do it. Secondly, we allow that to be reversed over a period of time because we don't want to lock people into mortgages which in 5 or 10 years don't work for them. But also, crucially, that it mustn't affect the credit rating of the individuals coming forward, because it's not their fault they're in this position that the government's now exposed them to, with very, very high mortgage payments month after month after month.
So Labour aren't really saying much more than the Tories are saying, Patrick. They don't want to be seen to be throwing money around. They don't really want to be seen to be pushing big business around. It doesn't really fit with their current vibe of trying to get into government. One other thing Jeremy Hunt did say, he said that where there is a drastic situation and people's homes are at risk of eviction and repossession, that the lenders have pledged that they will give stressed households at least 12 months before any eviction or repossession takes place without that household's consent. An important caveat there. In sum, Patrick, I think in general, something good happened in the building behind me today for hard-pressed mortgage borrowers.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people will be very glad with what you've just said there, Liam, and will just feel that weight lifting off them slightly. Still a lot of concern out there, though, but thank you. Liam Halligan, our economic and business editor. Now, I will have a bit more on this financial crisis later on in the show with the man himself. Regular viewers and listeners of this show will know him well. He was on yesterday, but he was so good we've got him back. This guy thinks he can fix our economy in an afternoon. It's former Bank of England advisor Roger Giwald, who was so popular with his 6-point plan to get us out of this mess. I'm going to have him back on to expand on it. Listen up. He also thinks that the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, should be sacked. So do I. So do lots of you out there. So I'm going to be continuing to ask that question. The clock has got to be ticking on Bailey, hasn't it? And after it's confirmed that 5 men sadly died in the Titan submersible, a Titanic expert asks if it's now time for people to stop visiting the site. I'll have all that and much, much more, but right now, here's your headlines with Rhiannon.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 3:33. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. And we start with some breaking news. A 25-year-old man has been found guilty of murdering a Met police officer in South London in 2020. Luis de Zoysa shot Matt Rotana in the chest at a police station in Croydon. De Zoysa smuggled an antique revolver into a custody block and opened fire while still in handcuffs. He was said to be known to the police, but lacking a significant history and any major criminal links. Met Police Commissioner Mark Rowley has paid tribute to Sergeant Rotana.
Matt dedicated 30 years of his life to policing. He was nearing retirement when he was tragically murdered. He was an outstanding officer who brought joy to his work. He treated everyone with respect, with compassion, and with good humour. In the days after his death, tributes flowed in from Matt's colleagues, from communities, from those he'd served, and from those who knew him in his life outside policing. They were a testament to the man that he was.
A man has pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of 39 people found dead in a lorry trailer in Essex in 2019. 50-year-old Marius Dragici was detained by police in Romania last year. He was charged with 39 counts of manslaughter and conspiracy to assist unlawful immigration. He is alleged to be the ringleader of a people smuggling gang. In 2021, 4 other defendants were jailed for their roles in the deaths. And mortgage lenders and the Chancellor have agreed people should be given a 12-month delay before repossession proceedings start against borrowers unable to pay. It follows talks with bank bosses this morning to see whether more can be done to support struggling households. Yesterday, the Bank of England raised the interest rate to 5% as it tries to tackle high inflation. And you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2708 and €1.1665. The price of gold is £1,518.85 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 7,464 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
Well, yesterday on this show, news broke that debris had been found in the search for the Titan submersible. And sadly, of course, it turned out to be the Titan submersible. The president of the Titanic International Society has said it's time now to consider banning people from visiting the wreck of the ship. Charles Hass was speaking a day after it was confirmed that 5 people on board the submersible Titan died after what was described as a catastrophic implosion. GB News' national reporter Paul Hawkins joins me in the studio right now. What is the latest reaction to that tragic incident?
So you mentioned Charlie Haas there. There has been a chorus of critics today who've been raising questions about the technical capabilities of the Titan. Dick Barson, the first British man to dive to the wreck of the Titanic, called into question the design and maintenance of the sub, saying there were many red flags flying there. Also, Titanic film director James Cameron, who knows a lot of things about sort of deep sea exploration. He's been joining the chorus of experts raising concerns over safety. So there have been a number of people that have been raising concerns all day. But we should say that Guillermo Sonline is a co-founder of OceanGate, one of the co-founders. He's now left the firm, but he's been speaking to a lot of people in the media, including Dan Wootton last night. He's pushed back heavily against that criticism, saying that people keep equating certification with safety and are ignoring the 14 years of development of the sub. They weren't there for the design, the engineers, the building and the testing. He said anyone who operates in the deep ocean, and I know you're going to be speaking to a submariner in a minute, anyone who works in the deep ocean knows you run the risk of this kind of implosion. And just a few new lines that are coming out regarding the legality of those waivers that they ask passengers to sign. Reuters have been speaking to private injury and marine law expert Matthew Schaffer, who says, and this is interesting, if there were aspects of the design or construction that were kept from the passengers, or it was knowingly operated despite information that it wasn't suitable to dive, that would absolutely go against the validity of the waiver. OceanGate, we should stress, could argue it was not grossly negligent and that the waivers applied because they fully describe the inherent dangers of the dive. The degree of any potential negligence and how that might impact the applicability of the waivers will depend on the causes of the disaster, which are still under investigation. So they're not necessarily, pending the outcome of the investigation, 100% covered by those waivers. But that's the legality of it. The investigation continues. They'll be retrieving the debris, and this will be interesting when you talk to your man, how long it will take to retrieve that debris, which will be difficult to find it, given the strong currents at the bottom of the ocean, how long it will take to get to the surface and the kind of investigation they'll be undertaking. But at the moment, it's in the very early stages.
Absolutely. Look, Paul, thank you very, very much for that. And completely right that as this conversation moves on, the situation moves on, it is going to end up being a chat about the legalities and these waivers, etc. So it's kind of good to get a bit of an early steer on that. It's Paul Hawkins there, our national reporter. I am joined now, as Paul was alluding to, by Mike Wellham, who is a marine operations specialist and fast becoming a GB News regular, I must say, as well, Mike. Look, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Can I just ask a pretty straightforward question? Now that the event has happened and we do have some clarity on what actually happened here, there appears to be some debate as to whether or not the people who were trying to get down and see the Titanic? Are these kind of heroic, intrepid explorers, or actually maybe a bit reckless? What do you think?
When these people, and there's always lots of people want to do it, it's a challenge. Somewhere in their life they want a challenge, and that's going to be the way it's done. Now, whether it's space or whether it's underwater, you're looking at sophisticated equipment that countries have actually put together to operate, where there's a vast amount of money. But here we have a vessel that it has no certification that we know of. What was its construction build? I mean, if you go to the subs that have been built during the Titanic exploration, the original, those things would have been designed and certified, tested, and have all the equipment on board that's necessary to take those people down safely to do what they had to do. Now, that doesn't rule out that there could be an incident and there's problems. That happens even for our military submarines today. So that's one factor. Here, from what I can see, what I've heard, this is negligence beyond belief. To have a vehicle that it has none of these tests. I mean, how can you prove that it was fit for purpose?
Well, what Ocean Gate would say to that is that the reality is that it spent them around 14 years to design this thing, and compliance perhaps with existing compliance rules and regulation may not have been appropriate, etc. That is a question that will be undoubtedly asked. The legalities of this are going to be the big thing next, and there's no two ways about that. I mean, that is going to be the conversation going forward about whether or not this lot are about to get sued for however amount of money. But when it comes to actually being able to prove any of this stuff, by the way, you actually called it, unfortunately, Mike, you called it right, actually, quite early on this show, earlier on in the week. You were very, very blunt with me, and you just said, look, I think that there's been some kind of catastrophic implosion here, quite possibly from the port side, I think you said, which you identified as being a specific area of weakness. How long will it take? Right. How long will it take to get the wreckage up from the bottom? Just hear me out on this. I mean, is there a case that we shouldn't? We should just leave it all there, and that's that, or not?
That particular question is certainly not one that I can answer, because that's going to be up to the family. They're going to be involved in this, and it's up to the authorities, because somebody's going to have to pay for this, and it's going to be an expensive operation. These vessels and these vehicles that they're using cost a lot of money on daily hire, and somebody somewhere is going to be paying for that.
Yeah.
So it's difficult to know. We don't know the sizes of the bits of the debris there, but just looking at the vehicle on the TV here, it's a reasonable size to have to recover, and that's a challenge in itself, because we've got an ROV down there, and that can film. It's got an arm on it, so it can lift and move things around within a certain parameters. It's not a heavy lift crane by any means. So they would have to put a wire down. So they're going to put a wire from a surface vessel.
Yeah.
It's going to have to good calm weather. They put the wire down. The mini sub would then take that and attach it to the item of debris that they want. And then it's going to have to be lifted up and then got on board the support vessel. That's going to need good weather, and it's going to need a heavy lift wire to do it.
Well, and a heck of a lot of money as well, Mike, and a heck of a lot of money. And this conversation is going to rumble on. And in fact, in the next hour, I am going to be having a chat, Mike, as to whether or not this is just time now to, frankly, leave the Titanic alone. Certainly from the human exploration thing, and maybe just leave it to unmanned vehicles. But look, Mike, always a massive pleasure to talk to you, albeit under desperately sad circumstances. Mike Wellen there is a marine operations specialist. Right now, the UK is warm and sunny for the most part, but we all know what weather can bring. Good weather. It means that more people are going to be trying to cross the channel, and thousands of asylum seekers have rocked up in the last few days. In fact, we can reveal that we have now hit our 11,000th channel migrant for the year. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions, and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio, and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real, robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Well, I've got a little treat for you because thanks to my wonderful Twitter followers, we've managed to track down a chap who was booted out of his school for telling a teacher that there were only 2 genders. So in mere seconds, we will have that legend on. But just to tell you as well, at 4 o'clock, I will be marking 7 years since this country voted for Brexit and bring you a big warning from Nigel Farage. A lot of that warning, of course, was to do with immigration. Right on cue. Rishi Sunak has, of course, promised to stop the boats, but it is not happening, is it? We have hit a depressing new landmark today. GB News can reveal that more than 11,000 people have now crossed the channel in small boats this year. GB News viewers can see some of the people who arrived in Dover this morning. And in fact, I can tell you that there have been more people crossed so far this month, and we've still got quite a few days to go this month, than this time last year. So it is indeed looking like it's going to get worse, not better. But there we go. Now, all week, we have been talking about the teacher who called a girl despicable because she wouldn't accept that a classmate identified as a cat. But this is not an isolated incident. And in fact, teachers have been telling off pupils for telling the truth about this kind of stuff for quite a few years now. Here is a very quick clip of what happened in a Scottish school back in 2019.
Was what I was saying.
Because I was saying that what's wrong with the website is that there are more than one gender in this country.
That's your opinion.
That is my opinion, and that is an opinion which is acceptable in the school. I'm afraid yours, which you're saying that there's no such thing as anyone other than male or female, is not inclusive.
Scientifically, there are just 2 genders.
You were clearly given an opportunity not to pursue it. You chose to do so.
Yeah, because I think it's silly.
You chose to do so. Yes, that's the key question. You chose to do so.
I think it's silly.
Well, there you go. The teacher there was talking to a lad called Murray Allen, who I'm very, very happy to say joins me now. Murray, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Can you just explain to our viewers and our listeners exactly what happened to you and exactly what the impact of that was? Because there was a teacher there just berating you for just saying that there were two genders.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Patrick, thank you very much for having me on. Back in 2019, when I was a secondary school student, we were in the class and we were signing up for a website in one of our classes. And during the sign-up process, as the teacher is explaining how to sign up, there was the drop-down bar on sign-up pages for websites that ask you to select the gender. And when the teacher had noticed on this website specifically that there were only two gender options, male and female, he presented that as an issue to the class and began speaking about how old-fashioned that was and how problematic it was. And I didn't understand that at all, because as far as I'm concerned, there are only two genders. And so I spoke up and I said, but there are only two genders. And before I knew, I was in a confrontation with the teacher where he was threatening to kick me out of the class if I wanted to continue standing behind that point. And I said, but I do stand behind that point. Next thing I knew, I was kicked from the class for about 40 minutes before the teacher came to join me. And at that point, I decided to record. Just on a whim, I recorded the interaction and it went online and it became viral quite quickly. And obviously that's why I'm talking to you now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what happened after that, Murray? Was there more issues at the school? Because it sounds like you're a man who refused to back down. Can I also just say, arguably the more depressing thing than this guy spouting a load of nonsense and trying to indoctrinate you with it is the fact that how easily you, at the time a child, was able to just outwit him and do him in an argument. But that's a separate issue. So what actually happened after that? You got in trouble from the school?
Yeah, so I was kicked out of the class. I had that incident with the teacher. The video went online and I was excluded from the school when the school found out about the video. And the video started making its rounds. People started, it went so far, I think, because people didn't realize the state at which this is being pressed in schools. I think it was quite shocking to people. So the video started spreading, and then I was called back into the school. And while it was sort of still in the public eye, they told me that I was going to come back to the school in 2 weeks and everything would be fine. And what they were really doing was they were trying to postpone it so that I didn't know I was going to be expelled, so that I wouldn't go and speak to, someone in the media or a journalist or something like that. And so 2 weeks later, I go back to the school. They say, actually, it's still very popular right now in the news, so you're going to come back after the summer. And really, they just waited and waited and waited until it died down in the news cycle. And then they told me I was expelled and no longer allowed to return to finish my education.
Now, that's shocking. It's terrible. It should be criminal, in my view. The reason I've got you on is this video resurfaced. And this week alone, I have had numerous conversations about children getting into altercations with teachers over the same issue as you about the number of genders there are, but also over whether or not their classmates should be allowed to identify as cats, dogs, horses, dinosaurs, or in one case, the moon. Are you surprised that this is still going on? What do you think about it? And in your view, where is this coming from? Is there an indoctrination trying to take place here from the teachers, or are the teachers afraid of being called transphobic? I just want to hear from you on this.
Yeah, well, absolutely. This sort of ideology began getting pressed when I was about halfway through secondary school. That's when I really noticed it started to take up part of the curriculum in my guidance class, for example. And I never agreed with it. And I know tons of other students don't want to be being taught this, but unlike other subjects where when you don't understand something or don't buy into something, you can question it and speak about it. And obviously in an education setting, you want to be able to have open dialogue and discussion about any range of topics. But it's very clear now in the education system, there are certain woke ideologies and ideas that can't be questioned. And if questioned, you will have labels thrown on your back and you'll be punished, and just like I was. And I've seen this much more now. And sadly, where I started experiencing this ideology in halfway through secondary school and was more able to realize it was false, now it's being pressed from an even younger age. And kids really now have very little chance because from the ages of 6, 7, 8, 9, they're being taught this is fact. And I know anything I learned at a young age in school, if someone said anything to the contrary, I would be adamant that that was right. I learned it in school. And so now when these kids that are being taught this get older and they meet people who don't feel the same way, they're instantly going to latch onto that person as a homophobe, transphobic, all these labels that these people throw at you.
Look at you, Murray, and they will look at you, and even people who believe the same thing that you do, right, will think, well, actually, right, I believe this, but is it worth me getting thrown out of school for it? I've got to ask you, we've not got too much longer left, Murray, but can I ask, do you regret it?
No, absolutely not. I said, people have came to me and said, well, are you not afraid this will affect you in the future? Because this generally is the type of thing that people get cancelled for. And as far as I'm concerned, I would much rather be the type of person speaking out about the things I know to be true and to be on the right side of the argument and the debate, as opposed to just biting my lip. Maybe I wouldn't have had to face the consequences of being expelled from school and life would have ran a little bit easier. But rather than biting your lip in these instances, I think it's very important to speak out and to not become the silent majority.
Well, Murray, you are on the right side of history. You will be on the right side of history. And hopefully, in time, you will be all the stronger for this. I really appreciate you coming on and putting your face forward yet again to talk to me about this and for being so malleable as well. And we had to move you around for a bit of breaking news yesterday. It's Murray Allen there, who's, I think, just, fantastic lad, isn't he? Right, OK, so, right, now, it is, of course, the 7th anniversary of Brexit. Later in the show, I've got a big interview with the one and only Lee Anderson. But if you feel like celebrating, Nigel Farage also has a stark warning for you. We're going to be hearing from Nigel himself in just a tick. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things. We've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point. But
and action.
Sergeant, the big Reed, my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News. Britain's watching.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 4 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News, and shock horror, Brits still back Brexit. Terrible news for all of the Ramonas out there, and even the ones who think it's not going well blame our politicians, not Brexit itself. We will digest all of these latest polling figures, and I will be giving you a start warning from the man himself, Mr. Brexit, Nigel Farage, shortly. Now, when it comes to the Titan that sadly, of course, imploded at the bottom of the ocean, I want to know what you think about whether or not the people responsible for creating this craft are some kind of like heroic explorers, or actually were they a bit reckless? Should we now stop trying to go and have a look at the Titanic, basically? In other news, I'm also going to be talking a lot about this story as well. Big one for us. Let's fix our economy. I have been calling for the Governor of the Bank of England to go. I think he is an absolute dud, and look at the mess that we are in. I will be having on, in this hour, a chap who thinks that he's got 6 points that could fix our economy in an afternoon, OK? So make sure that you keep your eyes and ears peeled for all of that. Up next as well, we've also got a little bit of Prince Harry. This guy is so deluded. Apparently, according to reports anyway, Harry genuinely wanted to interview for a podcast Vladimir Putin about his childhood trauma. That's the kind of idea that you come up with to an ideas meeting after you've had a few pints at lunch, isn't it? But there we go. And finally, this is very serious, and it's a GB News exclusive. We're going to be going big on this. There is an Islamist hate preacher who has been allowed to enter the UK and go on a tour of major cities spouting bile. He backs bin Laden. He backs the 9/11 attacks. He's absolutely slated our Queen. He thinks people who don't believe in his ideology should be beheaded. Why is he allowed to talk to people on the streets of Britain? And why, more importantly, arguably, are so many people currently living in Britain desperate to hear him talk? What does that say about certain elements of the population? Patrick Christys on GB News. Views in thick and fast, whole host of top topics to round off the week here. GB Views at gbnews.com. But right now, it's your headlines with Rory.
Thank you very much, Patrick. A 25-year-old man has been found guilty of murdering a Met police officer in South London in 2020. Louis de Souza shot Matt Ratana in the chest at a police station in Croydon. De Souza smuggled an antique revolver into custody block and opened fire while still in handcuffs. He was said to be known to the police but lacking a significant history and any major criminal links. Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley has paid tribute to Sergeant Ratana.
Matt dedicated 30 years of his life to policing. He was nearing retirement when he was tragically murdered. He was an outstanding officer who brought joy to his work. He treated everyone with respect, with compassion and with good humour. In the days after his death, tributes flowed in from Matt's colleagues, from communities, from those he'd served, and from those who knew him in his life outside policing. They were a testament to the man that he was.
A man has pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of 39 people found dead in a lorry trailer in Essex in 2019. 50-year-old Marius Dragici was detained by police in Romania last year. He was charged with 39 counts of manslaughter and conspiracy to assist unlawful immigration. He's alleged to be the ringleader of a people smuggling gang. Well, in 2021, 4 other people were jailed for their roles in the deaths. Unite Union says strikes at Heathrow will end as airport security workers accept an improved paid deal. More than 2,000 security officers at Heathrow's Terminals 3 and 5, as well as campus security, were due to strike for 31 days throughout the summer. Well, the union says the workers will receive a pay increase of between 15.5% and 17.5%. Junior doctors in England will strike for 5 days from July the 13th. The British Medical Association says it's the longest single period of industrial action in the history of the health service. It's part of a long-running dispute with the government over pay and staffing. A recent BMS survey shows junior doctors are receiving more job offers to work abroad since strikes were announced 4 months ago. A former policeman has been jailed for 5 years for sexual offences and misconduct whilst running a volunteer police cadet scheme. Adnan Ali, who served with Greater Manchester Police, sexually assaulted 3 victims, aged between 15 and 18, and sent messages which were bordering on relentless. The judge says the 36-year-old deliberately ignored guidelines for cadet schemes. A member of a far-right group has been jailed for sharing terrorist content with online followers. Christopher Kearney from Liverpool is believed to be the first member of Patriotic Alternative to be convicted of terrorist offences. He's been sentenced to 4 years and 8 months in prison. The 38-year-old was extradited from Spain following an investigation led by the Met Police Counter-Terrorism Command. Kearney pleaded guilty in March to 2 counts of spreading terrorist publications. Prosecutors claim by setting up a Telegram account in the name of Charlie Big Potatoes. Mortgage lenders and the Chancellor have agreed people should be given a 12-month delay before repossession proceedings start against borrowers unable to pay. It follows talks with bank bosses this morning to see whether more can be done to support struggling households. Well, yesterday, the Bank of England raised the interest rate to 5% as it tries to tackle high inflation. Jeremy Hunt says some homeowners shouldn't be afraid of asking their mortgage providers for help.
The most significant thing is that they can pick up the phone to their bank or their mortgage lender and talk about their situation without any worry that it will impact their credit score. And if they decide to make their payments easier by extending the period of their mortgage or by going to an interest-only package, they can go back to their original package without any questions asked, without any impact on their credit score within 6 months. That's the reassurance that people like Martin Lewis have been saying will make a big difference for families in those situations.
Well, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the government needs to take responsibility.
I think what people want is action, not words. And what we suggested is that there's a requirement on lenders to take these measures, because there are going to be many, many mortgage holders, many, many families across the country who are now even more worried about paying their mortgage. That's on top of all the other bills. And they know that the government's failed now for 13 years. They know the government crashed the economy last year. What they want, I think, is a much stronger sense that the government is gripping this.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, back to Patrick.
As ever, lots to go at, but I'm getting stuck into this right at the start. We have let a radical Islamist hate preacher into Britain so he can spout his vile hate to a flock of followers. And Ayatollah Abbasi from Bangladesh praised the 9/11 attackers as brave lions. He thinks that anyone who criticises Allah should have their heads chopped off. He's praised Osama bin Laden and the founder of the Taliban as well. He's already conducted talks in Birmingham and Nottingham. And until GB News outed this guy, he was due to speak in Leicester and Luton as well. What on earth is he doing in our country? When you look at some of the protests about speakers in universities like Kathleen Stock at Oxford, for example, people wanted to cancel her because she thinks that there are only 2 genders. Where are the woke brigade rising up against a radical Islamist who endorses beheading and terrorism? Where's Gary Lineker on this one? Where's the LGBT lobby? It all goes quiet over there when someone who thinks jihadis flying planes into buildings and thinks non-believers should be executed wants to dish out that filth on Britain's streets, doesn't it? But my main gripe, again, is with the Home Office. Why have we let him in? It's one thing letting everybody come across the channel, isn't it? It's another thing allowing a card-carrying, jihadi-sympathising lunatic to just take a commercial airline into the UK. I would also suggest to anybody, especially those on the left, that they should take a look at how many people within certain elements of the British Muslim community were clearly willing to go and take time out of their day to listen to a man who has previously said things like this. If anybody dares to criticise our prophet, that person should be declared as a disbeliever, and hence her head should be chopped off. If that person urges to apologise for criticising Mohammed, we would not give them any chance or accept their apology. In this democratic Bangladesh, which is where he's from, if anybody dares to criticise God, no matter that person be any intellectual atheist or blogger, it's very modern, isn't it? that person's head should be chopped off. Oh, we're back to the Dark Ages again. He also said, you will never have the merit to carry Lardin and Omar's shoes, even after 50 years of pursuit, referring there, of course, to Osama bin Laden and Mullah Omar, off of the Taliban. It should be a massive concern for us all that so many people in major places like Birmingham, Nottingham, Leicester and Luton wanted to turn out and listen to this guy. Do they agree with him? Should our police force not maybe be looking into anybody who does agree with him? This absolute shower highlights several massive issues in Britain at the moment. The fact that we let terrorist sympathisers into Britain being one of them, the fact that we have so many British residents who, it would appear, maybe agree with them, and how quiet the good guys on the left of British politics are about this. Get the views coming in. gbviews@gbnews.com. I will have more on that story a little bit later on in the show. I want to emphasise the good work that GB News investigative reporter Charlie Peters is doing on this as well, highlighting where this guy has been talking and getting those talks cancelled. But now to our top story. And Nigel Farage has a simple message to all of our viewers and listeners. That is, of course, Happy Brexit Day. Yes, it's exactly 7 years since the great British public gave the establishment a real bloody nose by voting to leave the European Union. And let's be honest, the establishment have not forgiven us for it, have they? Nigel was, of course, one of the main architects of Brexit. But whilst he's celebrating today, he's got a warning for all Brexiteers out there. You might have to have the same fight all over again.
It's that day, it's June the 23rd. 7 years ago today, we went out, we beat not just the British establishment, but the global establishment, despite every effort through Project Fear to frighten the life out of us. Tactics, of course, they'd use again during lockdown. Trouble is, the establishment never accepted it. They never, ever forgave us. And after 3.5 years of wrangling and finally getting rid of Theresa May, Boris made a load of promises, and I'm afraid his government didn't really believe in it. We've been horribly let down on immigration, on the reduction of EU rules. Frankly, the Tories have sabotaged Brexit. Sure, we've left, and we're standing taller in the world. And our financial services industry is bigger than it was, not smaller, as predicted. But the two big deliverables on immigration and regulations have been sabotaged. I fear, under a Labour government, we may just have to fight this all over again. Do you know what? If we do, we'll win again. Happy Brexit Day.
Well, is he right? Will we win again? Do you think that if you have to fight this again, you will, and you would, if you did first time round, vote Brexit? Some really interesting polling data has just dropped, and that polling found that more than 70% of people who voted leave would still do so if another referendum was held, showing little to no regret at all. There's some other stats on this. 61% of leavers still think it will work in the long run. Consider the kind of kicking that Brexiteers have had from start to finish. Initially, they had people trying to overturn the result. Then they had people trying to say that the referendum was corrupt. Then they had people trying to undermine it from the inside. Then we had Theresa May. Then we've had COVID. Then we've had the war in Ukraine. Then we've had people not taking full advantage, bizarrely, of Brexit and kind of just weirdly castrating ourselves despite what the public voted for. And then, of course, they've had the demonisation of them as people. If you voted for Brexit, you must be some kind of gambling little racist. And that shut a lot of people up. But despite that, 61% of people who voted for Brexit still think it will work in the long run. And those people who are disappointed with Brexit, fair enough, 88% of them really blame the politicians, not Brexit itself. But has leaving the European Union on that day in 2016 been a good thing for Britain? Have we made the most of what it promised? I'm joined now by former Conservative Minister Anne Widdecombe. Anne, thank you very, very much. Let's start with something that I think deserves to be highlighted. If you just listen to the likes of the usual types on BBC Question Time, etc., I won't name them, you would be forgiven for thinking that the vast majority of people, Brexiteers in this country, had come to their senses and realised that they should be back in the bosom of Ursula von der Leyen and co. And that just isn't true, is it?
No. Unfortunately, and those 88% percent of people who blame the politicians rather than Brexit for what has gone wrong are quite right to do so, because we have this wonderful opportunity. The nation had voted to leave. We thought we were going to leave. And in fact, we've still got vast tranches of EU law. They're openly talking about alignment. We've raised our corporation tax to mark that of France instead of reducing it to become competitive with the EU. And so what has happened is that, yes, we've had some advantages from leaving, able to do trade deals. Let's forget the Trans-Pacific Trade Alliance is worth 15% of the global economy. So we've got some quite striking trade deals. We have taken that much advantage. We've done nothing to reduce the numbers coming across the borders. We've rowed back on most of the regulation that was going to be taken off the statute books. And what we're left with is a sort of a Brexit in name only.
No, indeed. In fact, I would argue that it's quite a triumph, given the way that Brexit has been implemented, how people have been trying to undermine it, how the people who voted for Brexit have been relentlessly demonised by a kind of woke lefty Remainiac mob, that 72% of people who voted for Brexit would vote for it again. I dare say that those Europhiles hadn't counted on something, and that was that the people who voted for Brexit, no matter what anyone says or does, love Britain and believe in Britain and will just continue to do so.
Indeed, and the interesting thing is, I mean, I've talked to Remainers, by which I mean those who voted to remain, who've said to me, actually, if we had our time over again, we would vote leave, not because they think that Brexit has been a howling success, because the politicians haven't made it one, but because they've been disgusted at the way that the EU tried to obstruct us at every level, particularly disgusted over what happened over the vaccines. And they think we've been so badly treated by the EU that we should actually, that voting leave was right. So I would like to see a poll done amongst those who voted Remain, because believe me, some of them have changed their minds.
Well, that is interesting. I'll tell you what should be a concern, though, for the establishment, who have, by a lot of people's metric anyway, done everything to undermine Brexit from day one. And they've got the softest version of Brexit pretty much possible. It's arguably only going to get softer if Keir Starmer gets into power as well, with talk of some new, closer deal with the European Union. That'll hurtle us towards a version of a second referendum, whatever that may look like. So the establishment might be thinking that they've won. But you know what? I think it's the establishment Conservatives, really, who, let's be honest, they were the party in power, and they are now the party in power. So the ultimate blame does have to lie with them, who should be really questioning whether they should be stopped laughing now. Because of the people who voted Tory, who were Brexiteers, just 24% of them say that they will vote Tory again. So an astonishing amount of people there. They, I'm pretty sure, will not go and vote Labour under Keir Starmer, because why would you if you're a Brexiteer? So the Tories have managed to lose a huge number of votes there, and they're going to be mopped up by someone, Anne.
Indeed, and I mean, that is why I've joined Reform, because the Tories weren't doing anything Tory, and they certainly weren't doing anything that really qualified for the name of Brexit. And so I have joined the Reform Party, which believes in making the most of Brexit, in getting rid of the EU law that remains, that we can get rid of, and being proud and independent, which is what it was all about. It was about sovereignty. It was about being able to take control of our laws, our borders, our trade deals. And really, we've only done the trade deals. We haven't done the laws and the borders.
But it's been a massive act of national self-sabotage, and that surely has to be the thing that happens next. Whilst immigration was just one of a number of issues, it was arguably the main issue. For many people, it was the main issue, and that, therefore, has been the biggest letdown, hasn't it? What do we need to do in Anne Widdecombe's Britain, when I hand the keys to Downing Street over to you, what would you do at a stroke so that the next time that we spoke, on the 8th anniversary of Brexit, we can say, well, the people who voted for Brexit have got what they asked for? What would you do?
Well, I mean, there are lots of things to be done. The first is we can look at the categories of people who are coming into this country and see if, coming in lawfully, that is, and seeing if we can reduce the numbers coming in. We've got students dependents, we've got all sorts of people who are not actually coming here to work. Then we should look at the skills breakdown of those who are coming here to work and who are arguably doing our economy a favour. But we should look at those skills, see what is lacking in this country and head training heavily towards it. But also we should look at the people on the dole. Now, there's about 1 million people on the dole. You're not going to tell me 1 million people are too disabled to work. That is a nonsense. They are not working. They could be fruit picking. They could be doing the jobs that Brits turn their noses up at, which is why we've had to import labour from overseas and from the EU. We could be doing all those things. And then when it comes to the unlawful immigration, Patrick, your listeners know what I'm going to say, but we should be automatically detaining, not putting in hotels where they can scarper. We should be automatically detaining all new asylum seekers, dealing with them quickly, sending them back.
Well, on that note, we have welcomed our 11,000th asylum seeker of the year across the channel today. So there we go. Look, Anne, thank you very much. It's Anne Widdecombe there, the wonderful Anne Widdecombe, former Tory minister now, of course, of Reform. Look, more on this on our website, gbnews.com, which is the fastest-growing national news website in the country. Best analysis, big opinion, all the latest breaking news, you name it, it's there. And, though... yes, something else that's going on now, very serious. After the deaths of the 5 men on the Titan submersible, I'm going to be asking this question. Is it time to just stop people visiting the wreck? John thinks so. In the inbox, gbviews@gbnews.com. It's time to stop these excursions. The Titanic was found many years ago. Countless research has been carried out. Enough is enough. Lots of similar emails to that. Email in, get yourself on the telly. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce.
And I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for making the switch to mornings on GB News. From Monday, we are Britain's newsroom.
Weekday mornings from 9:30.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, in just a few moments' time, I will be joined by a brilliant economic expert. It's Dr. Roger Gewolb. He's furious with the Bank of England. He was livid yesterday. We're openly calling, of course, there for the Governor of the Bank of England to be sacked. Why? Well, because of the mess that we're in and the fact that he's got it catastrophically wrong. But he thinks that he's got a 6-point plan that could be enacted in an afternoon that would fix our economy. So I thought, well, we've got to bring that to the nation, haven't we? So he'll be joining me very, very shortly. But on to incredibly serious matters as well, to the Titan sub tragedy. Now, the president of the Titanic International Society has said it's time to consider banning people from visiting the shipwreck. Charles Haas said, a day after it was confirmed that the 5 people on board sadly died after what was described as a catastrophic implosion, he basically said that essentially we should stop people going down. Patrick, you can't stop people visiting the Titanic. This is according to Adrian, who's emailed in. You can't stop them climbing Everest, etc., etc., etc. I was asking you whether or not you think that we should be stopping people from going down now and looking at the Titanic, or whether or not the people who were behind the old Ocean Gate scenario were, intrepid, heroic explorers or actually quite reckless. So I can speak now with retired submarine captain Ryan Ramsey, who is fast becoming another GB News regular here, Ryan. I think I've seen more of you than I've seen my partner recently, actually, I must say. But, look, when it comes to the idea that we should maybe be banning human beings from going and looking at the Titanic, what do you think about that?
I tend to agree with that. I mean, there's a definition of exploration versus a definition of commercial tourism. And this is not exploration, this is commercial tourism. And the Titanic is actually a grave. I mean, thousands of people perished. We know everything we need to know about the Titanic. There's nothing left more to explore. And actually, it probably should be left alone now.
OK, I suppose there is also this discussion to be had about whether or not Ocean Gate is, was run by some heroic explorers who, were at the forefront of human discovery, like early astronauts, or actually whether or not they were incredibly reckless. And unfortunately, this is the kind of thing that happens if you do that.
So I think this comes back again to the definition of what is exploration and what is commercial tourism. And this, for me, doesn't feel like exploration at all. I understand totally that the funding of the commercial tourism adds to exploration, but it'd be interesting to know what other exploration they had actually been doing.
Do you think that there is a case to say, look, if human beings with, let's be honest, enough money decide that they want to do anything and that is not necessarily harming other people, i.e. the disaster that has happened at the bottom of the sea and, the immediate impact anyway of those people who voluntarily went on board this thing, that we should just allow people to do it? It might set a bit of a worrying precedent. Or are you on the grounds that maybe it is actually also quite disrespectful to the people who lost their lives on that original Titanic disaster? Where are you on that?
I think there's two issues there. The first one is you're absolutely right. Is it disrespectful to those that perished on that dreadful voyage on the Titanic? The second issue is the rescue effort that's been put in order to rescue these 5 souls, and that's huge amounts of money in order to rescue them for during this activity. So I think all of that has to be put into consideration when you talk about exploration versus commercial tourism.
No, indeed. Look, Ryan, thank you very much. It's always great to have you on and have your views as well. And, you know, can I just ask you one quick one, actually, if that's all right? Because I know I've spoken to you a few times now about this. You spent many, many years as a submariner. Even with your expertise and your knowledge and your experience, would you have ever got on Titan?
No, and for 2 reasons. One, I had no desire to go down to that depth and to view the Titanic. And secondly, I'd find it really difficult to go into something where I have absolutely zero control of the outcome. The thought of putting myself into a steel tube and having it sealed behind me and that I can't do anything to affect my own outcome if anything goes wrong would not be for me.
Look, yeah, Ryan, thank you very much. Completely understand that. I think we possibly have quite similar views. There's Ryan Ramsey, who's retired submarine captain. One thing that I think can't be underestimated, of course, and shouldn't be underestimated, is what a tragedy this is. The absolute bravery of the people who did it. And I know that there will be people looking at this now saying, where does that line go from bravery to maybe being a bit reckless? And I think that's subjective for people, isn't it? Just on that discussion about whether or not we should be banning people from now going and having a look at the Titanic, manned craft down there. Colin's been on. Because there's that link, isn't there, between, well, if we ban people from doing that, then should we ban them from going to Everest as well? Colin says, Patrick, people should realise there is one big difference between Everest and the Titanic, and that the Titanic is a graveyard. I would politely suggest, Colin, that Everest is a bit of a graveyard as well. Everest is a bit of a graveyard. A lot of people, unfortunately, have perished and are up there as well. So I'm not sure it's necessarily fair to compare the two in that sense. But keep your views coming in, keep your emails coming in. gbviews@gbnews.com is that inbox. And I've got loads more for you to get emailing in on very shortly because, in just a matter of moments, the former Bank of England advisor Roger Gewolf, who was so popular with you yesterday that he's back for more, has got his 6-point plan to get us out of this financial mess. And he's not holding back. In fact, he's giving it both barrels to Andrew Bailey, who is the governor of the Bank of England, hopefully not for much longer. And you will not believe who Prince Harry wanted to interview before his Spotify deal was binned. He came up with the kind of idea that you and I might come up with after a few pints at lunch when you get called into a surprise ideas meeting with your boss. Oh, and I'm also going to be talking to Lee Anderson on the 7th anniversary of Brexit, so stay tuned for that. But now it's your headlines with Rory.
Thank you very much, Patrick. A 25-year-old man has been found guilty of murdering a Met police officer in South London in 2020. Luis de Souza shot Matt Ratana in the chest at a police station in Croydon. He smuggled an antique revolver into a custody block and opened fire while still in handcuffs. De Souza was said to be known to the police, but lacking any major criminal links. A man has pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of 39 people found dead in a lorry trailer in Essex in 2019. 50-year-old Marius Dragici was detained by police in Romania last year. He was charged with 39 counts of manslaughter and conspiracy to assist unlawful immigration. He's alleged to be the ringleader of a people smuggling gang. Strikes at Heathrow will end as airport security workers accept an improved pay deal. Over 2,000 staff members were due to strike for 31 days throughout the summer. Unite Union says workers will receive a pay increase of between 15.5% and 17.5%. Mortgage lenders and the Chancellor have agreed people should be given a 12-month delay before repossession proceedings start against borrowers unable to pay. Well, it follows talks with bank bosses this morning to see whether more can be done to support struggling households. Yesterday, the Bank of England raised the interest rate to 5% as it tries to tackle high inflation. That's the up-to-date, but you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website. That is gbnews.com. Now, though, back to Patrick.
Right, well, more now on this financial crisis. Yesterday, I called for the Governor of the Bank of England, Andrew Bailey, to be sacked. But what else can be done to make things even just a little bit better? There is only one person to ask. Viewers and listeners were blown away by Dr. Roger Giwob yesterday, who's a former advisor to the Bank of England. So I've invited him back for more on the show today to set out a 6-point plan, which he believes could fix our economy pretty much overnight. So, Roger, how are you?
I'm very, very well. Thank you, Patrick. I mean, yeah, you certainly put Andrew Bailey under siege yesterday, not just you. I mean, just between us, I understand that confidentially he is having secret meetings with the Stop Oil people. He's trying to learn how to glue himself to his chair at the Bank of England.
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised, yeah, and then the police will turn up and do nothing about it. Classic, yeah, he's got an orange high-vis jacket on, but there we go. Well, can we have a look at your 6-point plan? Because for a lot of people, what's been going on, they feel totally out of control at the minute. They're doing nothing wrong themselves. They've been paying their mortgage the whole time. They've not been overspending. They've been living a normal, nice life, and then they see a load of financial mess coming their way, and all of a sudden the house might be about to be taken off them. So you've got a 6-point plan to help improve this terrible situation. Now, I understand that first up, you want the Bank of England to cut the base rate.
I mean, I've been saying for over a year that raising interest rates just doesn't make any sense at all. I've been complaining about it, so have other people, but basically we've got what's called cost-push inflation in Earth language rather than economist language. I mean, we have non-consumer-led inflation. Consumers are not spending. People are cutting back, okay, heating versus eating. In America, they've got consumer spending. They raised the rates. Their inflation dropped by more than half to under 5%. Here, it just keeps going up. And these guys, the government, the opposition, nobody's saying anything different. All the media pretty much is saying, yeah, we're combating inflation. Well, I mean, as I said yesterday, football manager walks onto the pitch for the 13th game with the playbook for the 12 he's just lost. I don't think so.
No. It doesn't work. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. A football manager would have been sacked a long time ago.
So these guys, I'm actually starting to get worrying tweets from people about conspiracy theories. Saying stuff like, I'm sorry, Dr. Roger, nobody and groups of people particularly cannot be this stupid. This is a plot. The idea is, wait for it, to get our homes away from us by forcing us out because we can't pay the mortgages, then rent them back to us, so become a nation of renters under control, then attack the currency, which is also happening. Pound disappears. Put in place a central bank currency, a digital currency, which controls our lives and every penny we spend. I tweet back, oh, come on, really? And I tweet back, pay attention. It's getting worrying because, I mean, these guys just aren't listening.
It's getting weird. It's getting weird. I'll move on to your second point of your 6-point plan now, I believe. So you want the government to bring in a temporary reduction of VAT. Yes?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I want them to stop raising interest rates and bring the rates down slowly and gradually, as they should have brought them up rather than all at once, and a temporary relief on VAT. 6 months, 12 months, just take the foot off the throat. Give people some breathing space to live. As the animal furry thing says, simples.
Simples, yes, is the meerkat. Right, OK, we're on to the third one. We're making cracking progress here. You are calling on the government to reduce the tax on fuel.
Well, that's a crazy one because people don't really realize that that's a triple tax. Now, there is what's called fuel duty on petrol and diesel. There's actually VAT on that. And the VAT is on the fuel duty, which is a tax, and on the petrol. So it's tax on tax. But it's actually triple because if you think about it, the pounds that you take out of your pocket at the pump have already suffered PAYE.
Yes.
Now, when petrol was $1.80 a litre, the government tax take was £1.56. Unbelievable.
Wow.
So for goodness sake, take a nice chunk of that so people can get to work and see their family. Take it off again for 6 or 12 months.
Yeah, exactly. And this factors all in. It all factors in as well. Because if you think I literally cannot afford now to drive to see my parents or whoever it is that you want to go and see, what about those people as well who just can't drive to work? They try and get their public transport. That's costing them the earth. It might not be running. So that's a shocker. That would be a good way of doing things. I wholeheartedly agree with you. on that one. And what you said so far is, forgive me, but, relatively simple. But this next one might need a little bit more explaining, OK? So you want the government to decouple the price of electricity from gas. Go on.
Well, I mean, this is a little bit obscure simply because with so many things, the politicians obscure it with weasel words, but it's actually dead simple.
OK.
2/3 of our home energy bills are electricity, OK?
Yep.
As much as 80% of that electricity has nothing whatsoever to do with gas. But because of conventions that were made way back in the 80s when the energy companies were nationalized long ago, they never got rid of this, our electricity is priced on the international gas price, which Putin manipulates, for goodness sake. And so when we go out for we have to go to the international gas market and buy electricity priced off that gas. Now, if you go to the National Grid's website, they've got a live real-time clock that shows you what we're really using. And if you look at it, you'll see wind, solar, nuclear, British North Sea gas, gas from the international market, 10%, 20%, 40%. Sometimes less than 20%. But we're being charged at the much higher price of 100%. And one particular think tank that's done a study has estimated that we've overpaid £7.2 billion for our electricity in the last 2 years. Another company, think tank, estimates that we would knock £1,500 off every home energy bill by tea time if they simply decoupled these.
Wow.
Boris has said to do it. Ofgem, the regulator, has said to do it. John Penrose, the MP who invented the price cap, which, by the way, he says is no longer fit for purpose, has told them to do it. This government and successive governments have been told for yonks
to do it.
Both parties, and for some reason, they just don't do it.
OK, well, I tell you what, we are absolutely at the races here. Your fifth point of 6 is about a decision that is about to have a huge impact on people. It's Jeremy Hunt needing to defer the increase in corporation tax.
No, we're on the 5th, but I'll do that one.
OK.
He's going to decrease the corporation tax by going back to Maggie Thatcher interest deductions. So in other words, you used to be able to take the interest you pay on your mortgage, as they do in America, and, well, not so much anymore, they've limited that, and deduct it. You took the interest you paid on, deducted it from your salary and your income, and that saved you some tax. Problem is, I've got tens of millions, many tens of millions out of our 68 million. I've got tens of millions of friends out there who don't earn enough money for that to make any ruddy difference at all. They don't earn enough to deduct what they pay for their mortgage. They're in trouble. They're going to lose their homes. They're part of the conspiracy. They're going to be the victims. It's Jeremy and Rishi thinking for rich people as always. It benefits the wealthy. It's ridiculous. If I can go back, the one we skipped was a very important one. The banks, like the energy companies, have made huge amounts of money from the mispricing of electricity. Not their fault.
Yeah.
And if I came and gave you a bag of dosh, you wouldn't say, no, take it back.
I would indeed take that.
Yeah, of course you would. So it's not their fault. It's the government. But like them, the banks have received a windfall of huge amounts of money as we've had 13 interest rate rises. I have had several emails shown to me, and I had one email from my own bank on my own, rather modest savings account saying, hey, oh, my God, you're not going to believe this. We are now going to pay you 1.7% on your savings.
Right.
Yeah, and if you want to borrow money, it's 12%.
Yeah, of course.
The government, which could act instantly, must say to the banks, look, all this extra money that we've given you, you must take some of this and apply it to people's mortgages so they don't lose their homes. And you must pay some of it to people on their savings accounts so that it's distributed equally, but not just for the rich.
And so, to summarise, you think that there's nothing stopping all of this being done in an afternoon, and the real winners would just be the millions of ordinary Brits out there?
I'll give them a week. Let's say it could be done in a week. But the really important point about this is that unlike changes in monetary policy, which in earthling language means fiddling with interest rates up and down, which takes 18 to 24 months to work its way through the system and do any good, okay? This is immediate.
So you feel it straight away?
You feel it
People are sick of waiting. People are sick of waiting for everything, for every single little policy to work its way through, Oh, we promise you that in a year or two's time you'll feel the benefit of this. I want to feel it now.
And they come out smiling and telling us how great we're doing. I mean, Rishi is concerning himself with AI, artificial intelligence. It's probably because we haven't got a lot of the real stuff around at the moment.
It probably is. Look, thank you very, very much. An absolute pleasure. Yeah, it's been fantastic. I hope a lot of our viewers and listeners have got a lot out of that. That is the wonderful Dr. Roger Gewolb there, who, of course, was a top advisor, is indeed, should still be a top advisor, I would say, if there's a role going at the Governor of the Bank of England.
They asked me why. I get all emails, why aren't you Chancellor, why aren't you Governor? I said I applied, but I failed the exam because they asked me, I flubbed the question, what would you do with the $600,000 a year? And I said, I don't know, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't know. You could just give it back or something, couldn't you? It'd all be only more than that. Look, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you.
OK, so, now, up next. Harry and Meghan's Spotify deal got binned earlier this week. Has that prevented us from hearing Prince Harry, though, get this, interview Vladimir Putin about his childhood trauma and Donald Trump? I mean, the mind boggles. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in their home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is two new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat.
Did you know,
All
Kate
sorts
Moss?
of rooms. Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Longhurst, and from Monday I'll be joined by Pip Thompson. GB News Live becomes the live desk, weekday afternoons, 12 till 3.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In just a few moments' time, I will be marking the 7th anniversary of Brexit with a big interview with the one and only Lee Anderson. By the way, he is not holding back in this interview. He is going to kick right off, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But another day, another chapter from the mad, mad world of the Duke and Duchess of Sussex. This will crack you up. Harry has been accused of wanting to interview Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin about their childhood trauma as part of the Spotify deal that was binned a few days ago. It's claimed he was keen to speak to them about their upbringing, what shaped them as individuals. The mind boggles. I'm joined now by royal commentator Michael Cole. Michael, thank you very, very much. Can this really be true that Prince Harry had, I was going to say a brainstorming session, but we all know that might be difficult for the lad, who had a situation where he wanted to get in touch with Vladimir Putin after he's invaded Ukraine and do a sit-down with him and talk to him about his childhood trauma?
Well, this is probably what happens to you if you live in La La Land, you know, the realm of make-believe. I mean, Vladimir Putin is so secretive about his origins. His alleged mother has just died at the age of 96. He never acknowledged her. It does seem that she was his mother, but he was brought up by foster parents, and he will never talk about that. With regard to Donald Trump, another one of the targets, well, he's very pro the royal family because his mother, who was born up on the Isle of Lewis, Stornoway, she was a Stornwegian, she was a big fan of the late Queen, and that has been adopted by her errant son. He's also a monarchist, so the chances of them sitting down and doing a podcast with Prince Harry, I would say, in the words of Muhammad Ali, he has two chances, slim and nil. But it wasn't just them, it was the Pope too. He wanted the Pope involved. Did you know that?
No. So this is great. So, Michael, you're telling me that Harry has walked into a meeting with some Spotify executives and they've gone, right, Harry, ideas for the podcast. And he's gone, bring me Putes, bring me Trump, and bring me the Pope. And I want to talk to them about their early childhood on what's gone on. Is this guy has he lost it?
Yeah, well, I actually can claim to have had a few words with Pope John Paul II on his first overseas trip, which was to Dominica and Mexico, and also when he came to Scotland. But I wouldn't dignify it with the name of interview. Now, you and your researchers and your producers, excellent people, they know how hard it is to book somebody of that sort of stature. I mean, also on the wish list was Mr. Mark Zuckerberg. Well, I suppose he might have a better chance with him, but he's probably in loggerheads with the people who do the podcasts, whoever they are.
Yeah.
So I think this is mere fantasy, but it is quite risible that is the way they think. Perhaps they think because of their royal status that they command whoever they want in the world to take part in these exercises, which, after all, what they are is money-making stratagems to maintain their lifestyle on top of their hilltop fortress in Montecito.
I just think it shows what self-entitled arrogance Prince Harry thinks he's got, that Vladimir Putin would leave his bunker and open up about his upbringing with a mother he's never spoken about. I mean, of course, the overarching message to Prince Harry would be, don't drink the tea. For the love of God, Harry, do not drink that bright green tea that's in front of you there that Vladimir Putin has just handed over to you. I mean, Trump as well has been quite outspoken about Meghan. I just find it hilarious that Harry would think he's on the intellectual wavelength as some of these people. But, Michael, thank you. I'm sorry it's a bit short and sweet for us today, Michael, but it's always a pleasure, and I really do appreciate all of your input, of course. Thank you very, very much. And maybe Prince Harry could interview you, by the way. He'd learn a thing or two. Michael Cole, there, royal commentator. Now, I just about have time. I'm just about to have time to tell you this. This time tomorrow, I will have just had one of the most painful experiences of my life. In just under 24 hours' time, I am having my chest waxed on camera. I'm obviously not doing it for the fun of it. I'm doing it so that I can look my best when I dance on stage with a group of male strippers next Wednesday, just a few days away. They're called the Dream Boys. I'm going to do 3 routines on the night. One of them will be an absolutely excruciating several-minute-long solo, which will see me get my entire kit off pretty much, apart from, you know. Anyway, I've already met with the lads to learn the moves, and I will be doing a full rehearsal next Tuesday before the big night itself, which is on Wednesday in Bromley in Kent. It's sold out, so I'll be performing with more than 1,000 baying crowds in front of me, disappointing the people of Kent, no doubt. But viewers can see on GB News there's me performing with some of the moves. And here are some of the people that I'm doing it with. Ripped Adonises, perfect specimens of men. They can dance, they can do it all. I cannot do any of that, OK? Yeah, look at it. They're literally humping a stage. Grief. Right. Now, I am doing it, of course. I will be humiliating myself, and I think that's obvious, to raise money for the mental health charity Mind. And I am delighted to say that thanks to you wonderful people, we have now raised £67,000. You can donate justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. That's justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. There is a mental health epidemic out there. Whilst all mental health is obviously, you know, it needs to be addressed, I am particularly focusing on the epidemic of male suicide, which is the single biggest killer of men under the age of 40. And in the next hour, I'm going to be reading some of the memorials from people who have written in to express to me why they've donated on behalf of people who are sadly no longer with us. We can save some lives together. Thank you very much, everybody. Justgiving.com/fundraising/challenge Christys. Right, OK, apparently I'm running out of time. So, it's the 7th anniversary of Brexit, and in a few minutes' time, I will bring you a big interview with Lee Anderson, Mr. Red Wall himself. But if you feel like celebrating, Nigel Farage, Mr. Brexit, has got a warning for you. Yes, that's right. Patrick Christys here on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing. We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's 5 p.m, it's Patrick Christys, it's GB News, and strap yourselves in because Lee Anderson is not a happy man. He's kicking right off very shortly on this show. The state of this country, he's also going to be talking about why he still backs Brexit, as do an overwhelming majority of Brexiteers on this 7th anniversary of Brexit. Lee Anderson sets the world to rights on this show very shortly, but I have some breaking news for you that has just dropped in the last few seconds. Yeah, this is bad enough. This isn't the breaking news. 11,000 Channel migrants have now crossed the Channel so far this year. And in fact, this month has already seen more people than came last month. But this is the breaking news. We've been covering this a lot on this channel, and it's about a former RAF base in Wethersfield in Essex that was due to be used to house asylum seekers against the advice and the desires of the locals, against the advice and the desires of the local MPs, and against the desires of the local council. I can now tell you that the breaking news is, unfortunately, this. They have lost an appeal, and that does mean that asylum seekers will now be housed, potentially around 1,000 of them, at a disused RAF site in Wethersfield in Essex. We will be talking about that over the course of this hour. We're also going to be talking about this as well. I mean, look at where all that money's being spent. Yeah, are you struggling with your mortgage now? So are millions of people. But should the state pay a little bit towards it? Should they help? A lot of people are saying no, because actually it would make the situation worse. But then what is the alternative, I suppose, really, if loads of people just lose their homes? We'll have that chat very shortly. We're also going to be talking about this. I mean, good grief. We have allowed a radical, terrorist-sympathising Islamist hate preacher to get into Britain, not just that, but do some kind of commercial speaking tour around several major cities. Two issues at play here for me. Firstly, why on earth was this guy allowed into the country? Secondly, is it not a massive concern that loads of people living in Britain are desperate to go and see a guy talk who thinks that non-believers should be beheaded and that Osama bin Laden was a great guy? Just a thought, that might be slightly worrying for people. Anyway, Patrick Christys on GB News. Well, get the emails coming in thick and fast. GBviews at gbnews.com. I'm going to get back over there and get right to it. Now it's your headlines.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I'm Rory Smith in the GB newsroom. A 25-year-old man has been found guilty of murdering a Met police officer in South London in 2020. Luis de Souza shot Matt Ratana in the chest at a police station in Croydon after smuggling in an antique revolver and opening fire while still in handcuffs. As a result, the Independent Office for Police Conduct recommends handheld metal detectors should be rolled out by all forces. Met Police Commissioner Sir Mark Rowley has paid tribute to Sergeant Ratana.
Matt dedicated 30 years of his life to policing. He was nearing retirement when he was tragically murdered. He was an outstanding officer who brought joy to his work. He treated everyone with respect, with compassion and with good humour. In the days after his death, tributes flowed in from Matt's colleagues, from communities, from those he'd served, and from those who knew him in his life outside policing. They were a testament to the man that he was.
A man has pleaded guilty to the manslaughter of 39 people found dead in a lorry trailer in Essex in 2019. 50-year-old Marius Dragici was detained by police in Romania last year. He was charged with 39 counts of manslaughter and conspiracy to assist unlawful immigration. He's alleged to be the ringleader of a people smuggling gang. In 2021, 4 other people were jailed for their roles in the deaths. Unite Union says strikes at Heathrow will end as airport security workers accept an improved pay deal. More than 2,000 security officers at Heathrow's Terminals 3 and 5, as well as campus security, were due to strike for 31 days throughout the summer. The union says workers will receive a pay increase of between 15.5% and 17.5%. Junior doctors in England will strike for 5 days from July the 13th. The British Medical Association says it's the longest single period of industrial action in the history of the health service. It's part of a long-running dispute with the government over pay and staffing. A recent BMS survey shows junior doctors are receiving more job offers to work abroad since strikes were announced 4 months ago. A former policeman has been jailed for 5 years for sexual offences and misconduct while running a volunteer police cadet scheme. Adnan Ali, who served with Greater Manchester Police, sexually assaulted 3 victims aged between 15 and 18 and sent messages which were bordering on relentless. The judge says the 36-year-old deliberately ignored guidelines for cadet schemes. A member of a far-right group has been jailed for sharing terrorist content with online followers. Christopher Kearney from Liverpool is believed to be the first member of the Patriotic Alternative to be convicted of terrorist offences. He's been sentenced to 4 years and 8 months. The 38-year-old was extradited from Spain following an investigation led by the Met Police Counter-Terrorism Command. Kearney pleaded guilty in March to 2 counts of spreading terrorist publications, prosecutors claim, by setting up a Telegram account. Mortgage lenders and the Chancellor have agreed people should be given a 12-month delay before repossession proceedings start against borrowers unable to pay. Well, it follows talks with bank bosses this morning to see whether more can be done to support struggling households. Yesterday, the Bank of England raised the interest rate to 5% as it tries to tackle high inflation. Jeremy Hunt says homeowners should not be afraid of asking their mortgage providers for help.
The most significant thing is that they can pick up the phone to their bank or their mortgage lender and talk about their situation without any worry that it will impact their credit score. And if they decide to make their payments easier by extending the period of their mortgage or by going to an interest-only package, they can go back to their original package without any questions asked, without any impact on their credit score within 6 months. That's the reassurance that people like Martin Lewis have been saying will make a big difference for families in those situations.
Well, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says the government needs to take responsibility.
I think what people want is action, not words, and what we suggested is that there's a requirement on lenders to take these measures because there are going to be many, many mortgage holders, many families across the country who are now even more worried about paying their mortgage. That's on top of all the other bills, and they know that the government's failed now for 13 years. They know the government crashed the economy last year. What they want, I think, is a much stronger sense that the government is gripping this.
This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now, though, back to Patrick.
OK, shortly, I'm going to give you my thoughts on Brexit, the 7th anniversary, us voting to leave the EU, and I am going to be talking to Lee Anderson on this. I am also going to be talking to Charlie Peters as well, who, thanks to a GB News investigation, has managed to stop a radical Islamist hate cleric from dishing out talks to floods of people on the streets of Britain. So GB News, they're essentially doing the job of the Home Office and the police. But, talking to the Home Office, I have got more news on that big story that I just broke to you moments ago. It's just coming through to us here. Unfortunately, it is bad news for the people who were fighting to stop 1,700 male migrants, only males, being housed at a disused RAF airfield in Essex. Braintree District Council, has lost a Court of Appeal challenge over government plans to place asylum seekers at Wethersfield Airfield. The council brought legal action against the Home Office over the proposed use of the airfield to accommodate the men for up to 180 days each under emergency powers. 3 judges today dismissed the appeal. The Braintree MP is the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, who said earlier this year that the site wasn't appropriate to house migrants. I'm just going to let this sink in a little bit for you, that a disused RAF base right now in the seat held by our Foreign Secretary is going to be used against the desires of the Foreign Secretary and the vast majority of residents and the local council to house 1,700 exclusively male migrants for around 180 days each. That area is not appropriate for it, as the residents have been telling me over the course of the last couple of months when I've been speaking to them. They cannot cope with an influx of those amounts of people, and it remains unclear as to whether or not those people who are in there at this 6.5 hectare site would be allowed to essentially roam free around the local area. The local authorities' lawyers initially asked a judge to grant an injunction preventing the use of this site. They said that it breached planning control, which I'm not surprised. Are you, if you lived in the local area and you want to put a conservatory on your house, I bet they come out against that, don't they? But you can plonk 1,700 young fighting-age males there. In a ruling in April, the High Court judge concluded that the court did not have the legal power to grant the council's application. And then earlier this month, it went up to the Court of Appeal and argued at the Court of Appeal. It was today, as we've just revealed here, now dismissed. And I'm just going to read quickly the ruling on this. So this is just coming through to me here. This is Sir Keith Lindblom, who is the Lord Justice Dingemans and Lady Justice Whipple. They've all said that the original judge was correct to say this site could be used. Here is what their statement reads. Having considered all the submissions made to us, both written and oral, on the issue of jurisdiction, we find it impossible to accept the argument advanced on behalf of the council. It seems clear that the judge was right to conclude, as he did on this issue, that his essential reasons for doing so are sound and complete. So there we go. That means that there will now be up to 1,700 male asylum seekers plonked essentially in a village in Essex at a disused RAF base. More on this as we get it. GBviews at gbnews.com. Now, in other news, Brexiteers are made of strong stuff. They have been battered and bruised, undermined, let down, sneered at, and still they keep coming back. What the establishment and Ramonas were hoping for was that if they softened Brexit enough, if they delayed it enough, they sabotaged it enough and waited long enough, the country would come to its senses and everybody would realise they'd made a big mistake and we should come crawling back to our unelected, undemocratic, shambolic continental bosom. They thought if they characterised every Brexiteer as a horrible little far-right gammony racist, then they could bully people into submission. But they were wrong about that, weren't they? The latest polling shows an overwhelming majority of Brexiteers would vote leave again. 72%. Despite it all, despite the years-long delay to get Brexit done, despite the fact our inept and unwilling politicians haven't delivered, despite so many of our elected officials deliberately trying to undermine the will of the people. And just to rub those snobby Europhiles' noses in it, 61% of Brexiteers think that it will work out in the long run. This is because Brexiteers, shock horror, actually back Britain. They believe that we are capable of greatness. And we don't need some washed-up German former defence secretary who was so bad at her job, by the way, that she made their military train with broom handles because they ran out of guns to run the show. They're the kind of people who belt out the national anthem, who don't really care about the minutiae of a spreadsheet. They care about bigger things, sovereignty, national pride, the chance to chart our own course. But here's the kicker. For those politicians and Remainiacs who thought that the establishment would win, 88% say that they have totally lost faith in politicians. over the way that they have not delivered what many would regard as a proper Brexit. They now despise them. They think that they're a useless bunch of charlatans on the take who don't represent them. And they're right about that, for the most part. People don't regret voting for Brexit. They regret that they trusted politicians to enact it. And here's the other kicker, especially for the likes of Theresa May, who was a weapons-grade disaster for this country, completely out of her depth, a pathetic specimen who was weak, tepid and timid when Britain needed someone strong. Don't send a Remainer to do a Brexiteer's job at the end of the day. Anyway, here it is. 57% of Leave voters who feel angry at politicians voted Tory in 2019. Now, just 24% of those people would. So if Labour really does want to drag us back towards the EU, I don't think those people are going to go and vote for them, are they? The other latest round of polling reveals this. Nigel Farage would get around 4 million votes if he stood for election. And that sums it up, doesn't it? That sums it up. Those whinging, miserable Remainers would rather see British people suffer so that they can feel better about their own decision to vote to stay in the European Union. In my view, they don't have your best interests at heart. They are only thinking of themselves and their posh mates. But they're barking up the wrong tree, because the evidence is clear. Brexiteers still back Brexit. They don't blame Brexit for anything. They blame the politicians. And in fact, all they want still, despite it all, is a proper Brexit. And that ain't going to change anytime soon. OK, GB views at GBNews.com. Get them coming in thick and fast. But get this, it is less than 2 hours to go until Big Lee Anderson's new GB News show starts. Lee is, of course, a big Brexit backer. And I caught up with him a little bit earlier on today. So I started off by asking him about this week's poll that found that 88% of Leave voters who think that Brexit has gone badly wrong say that they have lost faith in our politicians. Over to you.
Well, I think there's a lot of people out there at the moment, Patrick, that do not like politicians. I can understand why. We're going through a very, very difficult time at the moment with the cost of living problems we've got, and we see that mortgage rates have gone up once again. But look, you know what? 7 years ago, we voted today to leave the European Union. If we'd have voted to remain, would things have been any different today? Would remaining in the EU prevented COVID, the COVID outbreak, the pandemic? Would remaining in the EU prevented the war in Ukraine? No, it wouldn't. So, you know, I think people are looking sometimes for excuses or reasons or people to blame, especially the opposition politicians, the Labour Party and the like. They can try and put all the blame back at the Brexit door. But the truth of the matter is, would we be that much different at the moment if we'd have been remained in the EU? And I think probably not. And the big thing for me, Patrick, as you know, it's always been about sovereignty. Sovereignty, about the ability to make our own laws in this country, not have laws made behind closed doors in foreign lands. That was the main reason for me. So, yes, we've had a bumpy time over the past 2 or 3 years, but I'm sure it's going to get better. I've got absolute faith in this country, our great country, to make our own way in the world.
That's what people don't seem to understand about Brexiteers, Lee, which is that it was about something bigger than the minutiae on a spreadsheet. And we genuinely, I think, believe that Britain has got the capacity to actually become great again, to become even greater. Do you feel as though that there are many people, like the Alistair Campbells of this world, who would rather see Britain fail to prove that they were right than accept that we can actually be a success on our own?
Well, I mean, Alistair Campbell is a spent force, Patrick. He needs to go and sit in a museum somewhere so school children can walk by and say, you know, that's what politics used to be like. He's no place in politics at the moment. He needs to keep his nose out. And yes, fundamentally, he does want it to fail. He does want to say, I told you so all the time. But like I said, Patrick, you know, this country of ours, I've said it many, many times on GB News, it's a gift to the world. All the great things in this world have started in this country. We've been innovative, you know, we've been industrious, we've been creative throughout the world. All the best sports, the best industry, everything good about this world comes from this country. We can get back to that. We can be Great Britain and we can be a great force in the modern world.
Nigel Farage thinks that the establishment never wanted us to vote for Brexit,
and that never wanted it to succeed. And Brexiteers, from where I'm sitting, have taken an absolute kicking over the years. They had talk of a second referendum. Theresa May was a complete and utter dud with it. They've been demonised. They've been called horrible names. It's been ridiculous, right? But actually, I do seriously think, though... Go on, Leo, you take it away.
The establishment, yes, whoever the establishment may be. I think you're probably right, Patrick. You have to remember, before I got to Parliament and my colleagues, that probably, I don't know, 75% of the MPs in Parliament of all parties were probably Remainers and wanted us to remain in the European Union, which was a sign that Parliament was probably out of touch with the majority of the country, and they were. So, it's a bitter pill to swallow for some people, some politicians and the establishment, as you say. But, it's a little bit spiteful, for people to be sniggering on the sidelines when they see things not going so well. They should get behind the whole country. The whole country made a massive decision, the biggest decision in my lifetime, and we should get behind it. And people like Alistair Campbell need to go and clear off somewhere.
Look, we can't get around the fact that immigration hasn't got any better. In fact, it's got even worse. Record net migration, record illegal migration. They'll keep massaging those figures more than someone in a backstreet Soho knocking shop, won't they? And they'll say, oh, well, look, it's the fact that we've had to accept a load of Ukrainians and Afghans. There'll always be an excuse. The reality is that we haven't got to grips with immigration, and that's going to wind people up, isn't it? And my concern, I think, and possibly your concern more...
Well, it winds me up, Patrick. You know my thoughts on illegal immigration and legal immigration. I think there's been an acknowledgement over the past month or so by government that it is too high, it needs to come down. Of course it needs to come down. It creates a massive strain on our public services. We know that. There's a massive cost too. There's a social cost as well, Patrick. Don't forget that. Social cohesion, it creates problems. And it's all right for us MPs, sat in our 5-6 bedroom houses in gated communities, not living in the real world, not struggling to get that dental appointment or that doctor's appointment. Lot of MPs in there have got private medical insurance. All right for those sort of people, but real people are really feeling the pinch at the moment, and it's the real people that we need to speak out for.
It is. And on that note, Lee, you're going to be doing some speaking out of your own in a show that starts tonight, I believe. Do you want to fill us in a bit about what we can expect? I mean, if it's more of what you've just spoken about there, I think the GB News viewers are going to love it.
Well, I'll tell you what you can expect, Patrick. There's going to be a sudden influx, an outbreak of common sense across the nation. That's what I'm hoping for. The first show was recorded yesterday. It was pretty good. I think got some great guests on there. But what I want to do, Patrick, is get around the country and speak to some real people. Your taxi drivers, your bus drivers, your factory workers, your street cleaners, people that work in cafes and pubs, etc. Because these are the people. When I go about in Ashfield talking to these real people, these are the people with the real common sense in this country. It's about time some of us that work in that bubble, spent more time with our constituents, more time with real people. And if we did that, I'm sure we could make a much better job and be more representative.
Just very lastly then, Lee, and I'll let you get going. For those people who took part in this poll about whether or not they vote for Brexit again, who said that they wouldn't and that they regret it, what would you say to them?
I would say keep the faith, take a deep breath, because if we'd have stayed in the EU, ask yourself the question, if we'd have stayed in the European Union, would things have been any different? Would it have stopped the pandemic? And would it have stopped the war in Ukraine, which is creating all sorts of problems? And the answer is no, it wouldn't.
Right, well, there you go. By the way, just to say, I will have more on that breaking news about that site being used for 1,700 male asylum seekers. The Home Office, believe it or not, our Home Office has won its legal case, which does remarkably mean that they will now be allowed to house people there. You would have thought that would have meant the Home Office would have lost it, but no, that's the way our Home Office is. Now, Lee Anderson will officially become a GB News presenter this evening. Here's a taste of what you've got in store for you.
Hi then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
You're an hour and a half away from full frontal Lee Anderson. Good stuff. Now, loads more on everything that we've just been talking about on our website, gbnews.com. It's the fastest growing national news site in the country. All the best analysis, big opinion, and the latest breaking news. Now,
mortgage misery for millions. But I want to ask this. Is it time for the government to act in terms of should they help some people pay their mortgages, or is that going to be a terrible idea? And yes, want to emphasise again, I will be talking in literally a minute or two's time, actually, about the fact that an RAF base is now going to be used in a small village to house 1,700 Channel migrants, all of whom are male, despite massive appeals, and that is in the seat of our Foreign Secretary. So stay tuned for the very latest on that. That's just dropped. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often they will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute. Kick it up a gear with me, Patrick Christys, at drive time, 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+, on the smart speaker app and on the GB News app. And if you've got an Alexa, all you have to say is, Alexa, play GB News. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News and GB News Radio.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
You've probably seen politicians interviewed 1,000 times, but we do it differently. We find out who they really are, we don't shout, we chat, and hopefully we bring a bit of light, not just heat. Did you know Kate Moss?
Apparently.
Do you have a pair of jeans or a pair of jeans?
No, of course I don't. What would I do with them?
My friends are like, oh my God, what's she doing now?
Join me every Sunday at 6 for Gloria Meets, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce.
And I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for making the switch to mornings on GB News. From Monday, we are Britain's newsroom.
Weekday mornings from 9:30.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's breaking news time. 1,700 male migrants are set to be housed at a disused RAF airfield in Essex. That's after Braintree District Council lost a Court of Appeal challenge against our government's plans to place those asylum seekers at Wethersfield Airfield. Joining me now to discuss this is political commentator A man of many hats today, because we originally had him on to talk about mortgages, but I suppose this will affect the house prices. It's Russell Quirk. Russell, thank you very, very much. Thank you for being so nimble on your feet here, my good man. Look, 1,700 men plonked in a small village against the advice and desires of pretty much everybody who lives there, and indeed the Foreign Secretary, who is the local MP. What kind of impact is this going to have on the area?
Well, there's obviously going to be a number of impacts. One of the impacts is going to be house prices. So there was, and there's lots of research on this across the world from some pretty eminent, academics and researchers that show that if you are to increase by way of a significant concentration a number of asylum seekers and migrants into one particular area, that it does have an effect on house prices, potentially to the tune of 5%. Now, Wethersfield near Braintree, obviously quite an expensive area. The average house price there, Patrick, about £320,000. So it looks like, as a consequence of that court decision today, the people of Wethersfield, and actually you could argue the wider Braintree district, have potentially just lost rather a lot of money, £15,000 to be exact. So that's the first effect, potentially, if the academics are to be believed, the experts. Not always right, of course, as we know. But I guess the other thing from a social perspective, the addition of 1,700 people, and as you say, predominantly kind of young men who have come over here potentially unlawfully without identification. You know, they've chucked their passports over the side of the dinghy, so to speak. They are going to be mixing in that society. And, you know, there might be some people that have a concern about that, particularly parents of children. And actually, do you know what? It adds to the population of Wethersfield, which has about 26,000 people in it, 6 to 7% to that population overnight. I don't think that's a particularly desirable thing.
Well, they're not economically active as well, Russell, are they? This is the other thing. Someone's pointed out that apparently, you know, at that air base in the past, it was used for things like American soldiers and stuff, and they had a bit of money in their pocket. So if they were out and about in the local area, they'd be going to the locals' restaurants, pubs and shops. Well, with respect, this isn't going to be the case for 1,700 young men, is it, who've just come over the channel?
Potentially you're going to have, you know, a number of Syrian, Albanian, men from Afghanistan and so on hanging around on street corners. And, look, I guess I'll allow the people of Wethersfield to speak for whether they think that influx is going to affect the area and their, I suppose, the environment, you know, whether it's an economic one or a social one. So, look, and look, when we get to the politics of this, Patrick, of course, is it sustainable? Is it desirable? Is it right that the government simply cater for all of the migrants that are coming over at the rate now in dinghies alone of 2,000 a week we're starting to see again? So much for what Rishi Sunak said a few weeks ago with regards to the drop in migrants coming over. That simply was a flash in the pan, shall we call it? But the fact that the government are still filling hotels and barges and military bases with these illegal migrants is simply not the answer, is it? The answer is to stop them coming and to remove the incentives, not just to put them up in hotels and to give them a pizza when they get off their dinghies. It's absolutely ridiculous and outrageous.
We currently live in a country where our Home Office has declared a legal victory against the local council of the Foreign Secretary's seat to house illegal immigrants in, basically, essentially.
Yeah, indeed. So much for localism and so much for local democracy. I mean, and the trouble is, Patrick, the council will probably be blamed for this. Now, the leadership of that council have done everything they possibly can by way of lobbying and indeed legal action to try and stop this happening. I'm sure some on the left will say that it's racist to have done so, and of course it's absolutely not. They have a right to an opinion, which is that they want to protect the integrity, if you like, of their area, and that they have every right to try and do that. So the council are going to not only get the thick end of this, I think, politically, but of course services are going to be affected now. So how are the doctors in Braintree and the hospitals and the police going to cope with this very significant increase in people, regardless of where they come from and how they behave? Resources simply aren't going to cope with this. It's an abomination.
It is. And Russell, I just want to thank you very, very much for coming on and changing the topic at incredibly short notice and doing it so well. And also for hitting a really key point, which very quickly I'm just going to get you to repeat. And it is about the house prices. in an area like Braintree? Because we've got these venues that are going to be popping up across the UK. Roughly what do you think it knocks off the price of your house if you are somewhere within the vicinity of an asylum seeker complex?
Several academic papers say that it will knock up to 5% off the value of a local home. So in Wethersfield, that's about £15,000.
Well, there you go. Russell, thank you. Much appreciated, mate. Take care. Russell Quirk there, political commentator, who's just been discussing all of this. When you add that cost to then the cost of you not being able to go and see a GP or a doctor and the social cost and your safety cost, good grief, this is what a Home Office victory looks like in Britain today. Remarkable, isn't it? Get your views coming in, gbviews at gbnews.com. Loads more still to come between now and 6 o'clock. Find out why a 90s pop band have shown that they've got more morals than Gary Lineker. Yes, that's not something I expected to say when I got up this morning. But first, it's time for your headlines with Rory.
Thank you very much, Patrick. I'm Rory Smith in the GB Newsroom. Well, as you've been hearing from Patrick, Braintree District Council has lost an appeal over plans to use the Wethersfield airfield in Essex to house asylum seekers. The council brought legal action against the Home Office over the proposed use of the redundant site to accommodate up to 1,700 male asylum seekers for up to 6 months. The local authority argued proposals would breach planning control. Well, today, 3 judges dismissed the appeal, ruling in favour of the Home Office. A 25-year-old man has been found guilty of murdering a Met police officer in South London in 2020. Luis de Souza shot Matt Ritana in the chest at a police station in Croydon after smuggling in an antique revolver and opening fire while still in handcuffs. As a result, the Independent Office for Police Conduct recommends handheld metal detectors should be rolled out by all forces. Mortgage lenders and the Chancellor have agreed people should be given a 12-month delay before repossession proceedings start against borrowers unable to pay. Well, it follows talks with bank bosses this morning to see whether more can be done to support struggling households. Yesterday, the Bank of England raised the interest rate to 5% as it tries to tackle high inflation. Strikes at Heathrow will end as airport security workers accept an improved pay deal. More than 2,000 members were due to strike for 31 days throughout the summer. Unite Union says workers will receive a pay increase of between 15.5% and 17.5%. That's you up to date, but you can get more on all of those stories by visiting our website. That is gbnews.com.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News for gold and silver investment.
All right, let's take a look at today's markets. The pound, that will buy $1.2693 and 1.1661 euros. The price of gold, that's sitting at £1,514 and 17 pence per ounce. And the FTSE 100, that has closed the day at 7,461 points.
Direct Bullion sponsors the Finance Report on GB News, investments that matter.
I've got a lot coming your way. I'm hopefully going to go to Wethersfield, the site of the RAF base, and have a chat with someone there. I'm also going to be talking about this radical Islamist hate preacher, which we have allowed to wander into the United Kingdom and go on some kind of commercial hate-preaching tour across the UK, which is absolutely bonkers, but there we go. Before all of that madness, some more. Dance pop group Steps have turned down the opportunity to do a show in Dubai over a contract clause stating that they weren't allowed to mention sexuality. H, or is it H? I always get stick for this. Anyway, H, whose real name is Ian H. Watkins, said that they turned down the gig because of Dubai's human rights policies and specifically their laws on LGBTQ plus people. But this makes you think, doesn't it? Do the group turning down a show there for these reasons have more morals than Gary Lineker, Gary Neville and all of those people who went off to sun themselves in Qatar for 4 weeks at the World Cup and just do a little bit of a, oh, isn't Qatar an awful place, while they're raking in wheelbarrows loads of cash from it. Anyway, there we go. Now, let's get more from the wonderful legendary TV personality that is Steve Miller. Steve Miller, Steps have more morals than Lineker.
Well, I can understand where the argument's coming from, but you know what? Steps have such great music, and it's so sad to hear this decision. And quite frankly, you know, I think they're actually being a bit selfish because they're denying the fans of a great concert. We have to remember, when people buy a ticket for a concert, they're not paying for a lecture on sexuality.
Yeah.
What they are paying for is to hear some great music that we can all dance to. It's fabulous music. It's uplifting music. And actually, I think Steps are very well positioned to actually influence the government over there to change through their talent, rather than throwing this sort of, you know, well, cutting their nose off to spite their face, really, decision, because they can't talk about sexuality. My understanding, actually, is that the group did perform in Dubai in 2018. And actually, one member of the band is actually, or was, a teacher in Dubai. So it's kind of mixed messages, to be fair. I mean, this all comes down to, as well, standing on this sort of wokery ledge, and I say this as a gay man, you know, that, you know, you cannot go to a country that has certain rules and so forth, and maybe they're jumping on that bandwagon. That's what I suspect.
I do think there's very much a bit of that going about, Steve, because as you've said there, if they perform there earlier on, it shows how the world's gone, hasn't it? Where before, you know, no questions asked really, I'll take a wedge of cash and I won't really think about the politics of it. And now someone will sit down and gone, if you want to wave that rainbow flag, sunshine, then you've got another thing coming. And they've decided not to do it. I just quite liked the idea, though, that Steps have at least turned down the cash, as opposed to the likes of Gary Lineker and Gary Neville, who would sit there in a stadium built by slaves in a country that stones gay people to death and women aren't allowed to flipping drive, and just go, well, you know, we need to just love each other more. At least Steps have maybe, you know, gone with what they believe in, I suppose.
Yes, and I think you're right there. I think I do salute them on that. I think they're wrong to make this decision, though, to be quite honest with you. The best thing Steps can do and H can do is get out there, H, bang one out every night with the rest of them, banging out those gigs, you know, doing great work. They've got lovely voices. They're very popular. And I think actually the other key message from this is we've got to stop shouting about all this LGBTQ and the rest of the alphabet, because actually I think people are starting to resent it. And this isn't going to help us. This isn't going to help people like me that struggled in the 80s. It's going to set us back. So we've got to be very cautious. The other thing that I will say is that, yes, I may not agree with a country's law. However, they have the right to make their own laws. And so I guess coming back to the key message here, Steps, you know, rethink this one, because I actually think you've got it wrong. I think you could really influence the government over there through the power of your mouths.
There is. Again, you've identified another good argument, which is that whilst I do not agree, obviously, with the rules and regs over there in Dubai, and I certainly do not agree with people coming from certain other countries wanting to influence the rules and regulations that we have over here, which happens far too often in my view. However, if you are in another country, I think you probably should respect their laws, shouldn't you? And it is just a music gig, isn't it? So maybe, yeah, like you said, maybe they should have just cracked on.
Oh yeah, well, certainly if it was one of my gigs, I wouldn't be throwing a hissy fit because of a clause. I'd be out there using my mouth wisely, giving out my messages and so forth, and influencing the government in that way through the power of my own unique personality. That is the message to Steps. We've got to stop running away from the problems, and we've got to get in there and influence it with our talent.
Well, Steve, I wish that you would influence us with your talent more and more and more on this show. I'm going to start a campaign to get Steve Miller a show. But thank you very, very much. The wonderful Steve Miller, TV personality, always a great value guest. Just discussing the fact that, yes, well, Steps have at least got more morals than Gary Lineker. They've decided to biff Dubai on human rights grounds. There are some people
pointing out to me that Steps have potentially got some links in Dubai, and maybe they are being quite hypocritical, but hey, there we go. A reminder, though, of this hour's big breaking news. 1,700 male migrants are set to be housed at a disused RAF airfield base in Essex after Braintree District Council lost a Court of Appeal challenge. I will have more reaction to that story with a local resident in a few minutes' time. Meanwhile, an Islamist state hate cleric has been banned from speaking at events in the UK, and that is thanks to a GB News investigation. Without us essentially doing the job of our hopeless Home Office and police force, this guy would have been poisoning minds right across Britain. Patrick Christys on GB News, Britain's news channel.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News has its own late-night paper preview show, Headliners, where comedians take you through the next day's top news stories. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper, we've got it covered for you. Headliners, every night at 11 p.m, and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com? You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions, and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio, and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark Longhurst, and from Monday I'll be joined by Pip Thompson. GB News Live becomes the live desk, weekday afternoons, 12 till 3.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio, and online.
Join the live desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's GB News exclusive time. 2 events in the UK featuring an Islamist hate cleric have now been cancelled following a GB News investigation. The radical Islamic preacher has previously praised the 9/11 terrorists as brave lions, lauded the mastermind of the attacks, as well as Osama bin Laden. In fact, he's done loads more. He thinks people who don't agree with him or who are mean about Allah should have their heads cut off. GB News investigator reporter Charlie Peters has this exclusive story. Charlie, fill us in quickly. Who is this guy? How did we manage to stop him preaching on the street? And what kind of people were going to go and watch him talk?
His name is Ayatollah Abbasi. He's a Bangladeshi Islamist cleric, and he's been invited to Britain by a rival channel, actually, for Bangladeshis called Ion TV. They've hosted discussions in the country before, and previously they've invited Islamists who've been blocked from entering the country. One, indeed, in 2021, blocked boarding a flight from Doha. But this man, Mr. Abbasi, he snuck through, which is surprising considering how extensive his remarks are. Some of them, as you've just alluded to there, calling for beheadings, praising 9/11 terrorists, and having very positive things to say about Osama bin Laden, not necessarily the kind of person you'd expect to be visiting freely to Britain. So 3 events have been stopped in the last week. One in Newham in East London on Wednesday, and now these 2 announced today, cancelled in Leicester and banned in Luton from attending those 2 events. However, the Home Office have refused to confirm to me whether or not they are investigating, and GB News does understand that it is likely that they are intending to wait out the remainder of Mr. Abbasi's visa, and so he exits on his own accords and does not get forcibly deported.
OK, that's staggering. I also think that the other key thing for me is this. We clearly have so many Brits, quotes unquote Brits, living in this country right now who wanted to go and watch a radical Islamic hate preacher and who quite possibly agree with him. What about them?
Well, he's incredibly popular. That's what's so remarkable about this hateful commentary. Indeed, some of the comments he's made about Ahmadi Muslims, a persecuted sect of the Islamic faith, have been very warmly received by some sects of the British Muslim population. Indeed, in 2016, an Ahmadi Muslim shopkeeper in Glasgow was murdered by radicals who drove up from the northwest of England, and there was not the level of uproar you might have expected from that sort of event. When I've spoken to the hosts of these venues and indeed the people organising the talks, they've pretended to me, well, I assume they've pretended that they were not aware of his extreme remarks. And indeed, one host said to me they were anticipating Mr. Abbasi to issue some kind remarks ahead of an Islamic holiday. Now, that seems unlikely, both in terms of the fact that they did not know about his pro-Islamist, pro-beheading commentary, but also seems particularly unlikely that he was willing to give a calm and kind speech. And now the concern, of course, is that with these events banned and the Home Office not intervening, not deporting, his talks might go underground and even more extreme rhetoric might flourish.
Charlie, look, thank you, and thank you very much for all the work that you've been doing, because you potentially managed to stop a guy there who was about to go and spout a load of hay. Thank you. Charlie Peters, their GB News investigates reporter. Now, I have just about got time for an update on that big breaking news this hour. 1,700 men, exclusively men, migrants, are going to be housed at a disused RAF airfield in Essex. That's after Braintree District Council lost a Court of Appeal challenge to the government to be able to house asylum seekers at Wethersfield Airfield. I am joined now by Kevin Saunders, former Chief Immigration Officer at UK Border Force. Kevin, thank you. Are we not about to witness around 1,700 men who would not get here legally through the legal immigration channels being housed at the taxpayers' expense against the wishes of the local council and indeed the local MP, who happens to be our Foreign Secretary?
Yes, we have it. You're right. That's exactly what's happening. However, it is an awful lot cheaper to house these people at Weatherfield than to put them into hotels at £150 a night per person. So it makes sense to do it. The locals won't like it. No local within the UK has supported having asylum seekers in their towns.
Kevin, can I be... I'm going to be really rude now, Kevin. I'm so sorry about this. I've just had it in my ear that we've managed to get hold of a chap called Alan Mackenzie, who's the chair of the Fields Association, which is a local residents group in Wethersfield. I'm just going to bring him in now very quickly. We've only got a couple of minutes left. But, Alan, thank you very, very much. So, look, you have unfortunately lost to the Home Office and you're going to have 1,700 men in your area.
Well, we've lost round one because this was an appeal by Braintree, on Braintree District Council's part in regards to an injunction which they placed on the Home Office and the MOD. And quite frankly, it was put to the judges on the wrong basis. It was the wrong clause that they were using. They had to use a different clause, which would have involved looking for permission from the Ministry of Defence itself to put an injunction on the Home Office. That was never going to happen. The good point that's come out of this judgment is that the judges at the Court of Appeal have not ruled on whether this is an emergency or not. And we have some discussions going on with other parties involved at Scampton, Bexhill, on a judicial review point. And the judicial review point encompasses the emergency point, which the judges at the appeal court have decided not to rule on. They're leaving it until later. So round 2 is coming up.
So you're fighting on. Look, Alan, thank you for coming on at such short notice. It's short and sweet. I want to talk to you again very, very soon, my good man. But you've heard it here first. They are going to fight on against this, and they're going to join up with some of the other people as well from the other areas where these disused bases are going to be used. He says round 1 is over, but hold your breath for round 2. Right, that's it. I'm off. Patrick Christys, GB News. Thank you very much. I'll see you next week. Jubes is next.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry here with your evening GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. It's a warm and humid weekend to come for pretty much all of us, all due to us feeding in winds from the southwest, and that's feeding in this mild air across all areas of the UK. We do still need to watch out for these frontal features pushing their way across through Friday evening, and that could bring quite a lot of rain for parts of Scotland, heavy in places, particularly over higher ground areas. Towards the south and east, staying drier through the night with some clearer spells. Might see the odd mist and fog patch, but for all of us it is going to be a mild and humid night. Towns and cities not dropping much lower than 17 degrees Celsius, so it could be quite sticky as some of us head to bed. Into Saturday morning, still some outbreaks of rain for parts of Cumbria into northwest Scotland, gradually pushing their way northwestwards, but generally they'll fade out as we head into the afternoon. The cloud will break up a bit more, allowing those sunny intervals to develop. In that sunshine across Northern Ireland, parts of central Scotland will see temperatures higher than they were on Friday, around the mid-20s, but climbing towards 30 degrees Celsius in southeastern areas of England. Really will be quite a hot day with some strong UV levels if you are out in the sunshine. Into Saturday evening, that cloud will melt its way off, so there will be some late sunshine that will turn into clear intervals overnight, but it's going to be another humid one for all of us. Again, 17 Celsius, the lows. Then into Sunday, we are watching this feature as it pushes in from the west. Could provide quite heavy rain for Northern Ireland, parts of western Scotland, before it eventually moves its way into England.